When Clara May Whitfield collapsed on that frozen platform in Bitter Creek, Wyoming, with blood soaking through her split boots and a crumpled letter still clutched in her frozen fingers, she never imagined the man who'd promised her everything would step over her body like she was nothing but trash. But in that moment of complete devastation, when every respectable person turned away, a quiet cowboy with haunted eyes would change her life with 7 simple words. This is a story of survival betrayal, and the kind of love that rises from ashes. Stay with me until the very end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels across the world. The train whistle screamed through the Wyoming winter as Clara May Whitfield pressed her palm against the frosted window. Her breath made small clouds that disappeared almost as fast as they formed. 26 years old, 2,000 miles from Boston, and everything she owned fit in one battered carpet bag held together with hope and twine. Bitter Creek, 5 minutes. Bitter Creek Station. Clara's heart slammed against her ribs. She reached into her coat pocket for the 100th time, touching the letters there. Theodore's letters. Her fingers knew every crease, every fold, every beautiful lie written in that elegant hand. My dearest Clara, when you arrive, look for me on the platform. I'll be wearing a gray coat and holding winter roses. Don't worry about your circumstances. I'm not marrying your past. I'm marrying your future. She'd read those words so many times the paper had grown soft as cloth. You, the mail-order bride? Clara turned. An older woman across the aisle was watching her with sharp eyes and a knowing expression. I beg your pardon. Saw you reading them letters over and over. Same look my sister had when she came west to marry a man she'd never met. The woman leaned closer. How much you know about him? This man of yours. He's a businessman, owns a trading company. Clara heard the defensive edge in her own voice. He's educated, kind. He wrote me beautiful letters. The woman nodded slowly. Men can write all sorts of things in letters. Question is what they do when you're standing in front of them, flesh and blood, instead of paper and ink. The train lurched. Clara grabbed the seat back to steady herself. I'm sure Theodore is exactly what he promised. Hope you're right, honey. The woman gathered her things as the train slowed. But if you ain't remember this, the West breaks some women, but it makes others stronger than they ever knew they could be. She was gone before Clara could respond. The train shuddered to a stop. Clara stood on legs that felt like water and made her way to the door. The cold hit her like a fist the moment she stepped onto the platform. A bitter, biting cold that cut through her thin wool coat like it wasn't there. Her boots held together with wire, and prayers immediately began to soak through. The left sole had split 3 days ago somewhere in Nebraska. She'd wrapped it with strips torn from her petticoat, but the makeshift repair was failing. She could feel the frozen wood of the platform through the gap, feel the wet seeping into her stocking, feel the familiar sting that meant her feet were bleeding again. She scanned the crowd. Men in heavy coats. Women bundled in furs. Children chasing each other through the steam rising from the locomotive. No gray coat. No winter roses. Clara's stomach dropped. Excuse me. She stopped a passing porter. I'm looking for Theodore Ashworth. He was supposed to meet me here. The porter's expression flickered something that might have been recognition, might have been pity. Ashworth. Try the station office, ma'am. Sometimes folks wait inside when it's this cold. Thank you. She limped toward the small wooden building, her carpetbag banging against her leg with each step. The pain in her feet was getting worse, a throbbing, burning sensation that made her want to cry. But Clara May Whitfield had stopped crying 3 years ago when her mother died in that cramped Boston tenement, worked to death at 42. Tears didn't change anything. They just made your face wet. The station office was warm at least. A pot-bellied stove glowed in the corner. A few people sat on wooden benches waiting for the next train out. And there by the window stood a man in a gray coat. Clara's heart leaped. Theodore! He turned. He was exactly as his photograph had promised. Handsome, well-groomed. The gray coat was expensive wool, the boots beneath it polished to a shine. A gold watch chain glinted across his vest. But his face went through a transformation as he looked at her. Recognition first, then something else. His eyes traveled down from her face to her patched coat, her worn dress, her ruined boots, leaving wet, bloody prints on the wooden floor. And then his expression closed like a door slamming shut. Theodore. Clara stepped forward, relief and exhaustion making her voice shake. I'm so glad to find you. The journey was... I'm sorry. His voice was cool, cultured, utterly devoid of warmth. Do I know you? The words didn't make sense. Clara blinked, certain she'd misheard. It's me, Clara. Clara May Whitfield. We've been corresponding for 8 months. You sent me money for the train ticket. You asked me to... I'm afraid there's been some mistake. Theodore took a step backward, putting distance between them. His voice rose slightly loud enough that the other people in the station office turned to look. I don't know this woman. I've never seen her before in my life. Clara felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. But your letters... She fumbled in her pocket, pulling out the worn bundle. You wrote to me. You said... Miss. Theodore's tone hardened. I don't know what unfortunate situation brought you here, or what delusions you've constructed, but I must ask you to stop accosting me. This is embarrassing for both of us. Embarrassing? Clara heard her own voice break. You promised me a home, a life. You said you wanted someone strong, someone who could build something with you. You said you didn't care about circumstances, only character. I said nothing of the kind. Theodore glanced at the watching crowd, his jaw tight. I've never written to you. I've never sent you money. And I certainly never invited some desperate, destitute woman to follow me across the country. The word desperate landed like a slap. Clara looked down at herself, at her stained coat, her bleeding feet, her frozen, chapped hands clutching letters that suddenly felt like evidence of her own foolishness. Please! The word escaped before she could stop it. Please, Theodore. I have nowhere else to go. I used everything I had to get here. If you could just... Miss Henderson. Theodore's voice rang out sharply. A woman in expensive furs detached from a group near the door and glided over. Beautiful, blonde, diamonds glittering at her ears. She took Theodore's arm with the easy possessiveness of someone who'd never been refused anything in her life. Is there a problem, darling? Just a misunderstanding. Theodore patted her gloved hand. This woman seems to think we have some sort of arrangement. Miss Henderson looked at Clara the way one might look at a stain on a fine carpet. How unfortunate. Her voice dripped with false sympathy. Perhaps she should try the saloons. I hear they're always looking for... help. The implication was unmistakable. Clara's face burned. She felt every eye in the station office on her, felt the whispers starting, the judgments forming. Poor thing. Mail-order bride. Desperate. Pathetic. Your letter said you wanted someone who wouldn't give up easily. Clara's voice came out stronger than she expected, hardened by something that felt like the last remnants of her pride. You said you admired strength. Perseverance. Theodore's mask slipped for just a moment, a flicker of guilt quickly buried. I may have written such things, he said carefully to someone, but clearly there was a misunderstanding about expectations. His gaze dropped to her ruined boots. I require a wife who can present herself appropriately, who can move in society, who can represent my interests without causing embarrassment. He looked at Miss Henderson, at her furs and diamonds and perfectly styled hair. I believe I've found what I was looking for. You mean you found money? Clara heard the words leave her mouth and couldn't stop them. Her father owns the trading company, doesn't he? That's why you're here. That's why you needed a wife quickly. You were never going to marry me. You just kept me on the hook in case your real plan fell through. Theodore's face went red. How dare you? The letters are dated, Theodore. I have 8 months of correspondence proving you courted me, proving you made promises. Clara's voice shook, but she didn't look away. What happens if Miss Henderson's father sees them? For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Theodore stepped close enough that only Clara could hear him. Listen to me carefully, he hissed. You're nobody. A penniless seamstress from a Boston slum. You have nothing. You are nothing. And if you try to cause trouble for me, I will destroy whatever pathetic remnants of reputation you have left." He stepped back, his public mask firmly in place. "I trust we understand each other." He turned and walked away, Miss Henderson on his arm. The crowd parted for them like water around stones. Clara stood frozen in place, the letters still clutched in her hand. Then her legs gave out. She didn't fall gracefully. She went down hard, her carpetbag spilling open her knees, hitting the wooden floor with a crack that echoed through the suddenly silent station. The impact sent fresh pain shooting through her damaged feet, and for a moment, black spots danced across her vision. "Get up," she told herself. "Don't let them see you break. Get up." But her body wouldn't cooperate. The cold, the exhaustion, the shock of betrayal, it all crashed over her at once, and she found herself on her hands and knees on a train station floor 2,000 miles from anything she'd ever known, with nothing but the clothes on her back and shoes that were held together with bloody twine. The whispers grew louder. "Someone should call the sheriff. Can't just leave her there? Not our problem, is it? She's the one who came out here chasing a man." Clara tried to gather her scattered belongings. Her fingers were numb, clumsy. A book of poetry her mother had given her. A wooden comb missing 2 teeth. A photograph of her parents on their wedding day. "Here." A hand appeared in her field of vision. Large, calloused, weathered by work and weather. The nails were clean, but the knuckles were scarred. Clara looked up. The man standing over her was tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders, and the lean, muscular build of someone who worked hard for every meal. His clothes were simple. Worn denim trousers, a faded blue work shirt under a sheepskin coat, a battered hat pushed back from his forehead. His face was weathered, lined by sun and wind, and something else. Something that looked like old pain carefully contained. His eyes were gray, the color of storm clouds or gunmetal or the winter sky outside. There was silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. He didn't look like a rescuer from a fairy tale. He looked tired and weathered and real. "Ma'am." His voice was low, rough around the edges. "Can you stand?" Clara stared at his offered hand like it might bite her. "I don't need charity." "Didn't offer any." His expression didn't change. "Asked if you could stand." Clara tried to push herself up. Her legs trembled. Her feet screamed in protest. "Yes, I can." She collapsed again. The man didn't say anything. He just crouched down beside her, calm, as if he had all the time in the world, and started helping her gather her scattered belongings. He handled them carefully, the book of poetry, the wooden comb, the photograph, tucking each item back into her carpetbag, with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his rough hands. Those letters. He nodded toward the bundle still clutched in her fist. They from him, the fancy one who just left. Clara couldn't speak. She nodded. Figured. He secured her carpetbag closed. Heard most of what he said. Some people got no decency in them. Just emptiness dressed up in expensive clothes. He stood, then reached down again. Name's Emmett Callahan. Got a ranch about 6 miles north of town. It ain't much, but it's warm, and there's food. He paused. You look like you could use both. Clara stared at him. Why? Why what? Why would you help me? You don't know me. For all you know, I'm exactly what he said, desperate delusional trouble. Something shifted in those gray eyes. Not pity. Clara had learned to recognize pity, and this wasn't it. Something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. My ma came west in '51, Emmett said quietly. Arrived in California with nothing but me and the clothes on her back. Her shoes were so worn through, she'd stuffed them with newspaper to keep out the cold. He looked down at Clara's ruined boots, at the blood seeping through onto the station floor. A stranger took her in, woman named Ruth Callahan, who couldn't have children of her own. Ruth gave my ma work, taught her how to survive out here, eventually married her off to her brother. That's how we got the name. He paused. Ruth died 12 years ago. My ma followed her this past spring. Before she went, she made me promise something. Said if I ever saw someone in need, really in need the way she'd been, I shouldn't turn away. His hand remained extended, steady as stone. "You remind me of her. Not how you look. How you're still fighting even when the fight's beaten out of you. How you ain't cried once even though anyone would understand if you did." Clara felt something crack inside her chest. "Those boots carrying you all the way from back east?" Emmett asked. "Boston. Before that, Philadelphia. Long way to travel. They were good boots once." "I expect they were." His voice was soft. "Seems to me any boots that can carry a person 2,000 miles have done their job pretty well. Don't matter much what they look like at the end." Clara's throat tightened. Of all the things anyone could have said in that moment, these simple words hit hardest. Not sympathy, not judgment, just acknowledgement, recognition of what she'd survived to get here. She took his hand. His grip was warm and solid as he helped her to her feet. She swayed, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow, firm enough to support, gentle enough not to hurt. "Can you walk?" "I've been walking for 3 weeks." Clara heard the steel in her own voice. "I can walk 6 more miles." Something flickered across Emmett's face. It might have been the beginning of a smile. "Didn't say you had to walk. Got a wagon outside." He picked up her carpet bag like it weighed nothing and started toward the door. Clara hesitated. "Mr. Callahan." He turned. "I need you to understand something." She met his eyes directly. "I'm not looking for a husband. I'm not looking for rescue. I made that mistake once, and it nearly destroyed me. If you're offering help with expectations of anything in return, I ain't." "Then why?" "Because it's the right thing to do." His voice was matter-of-fact. "Don't need a reason beyond that. Don't need you to be grateful or beholden or anything else. Just need you to get warm and fed before you freeze to death on my conscience." He held the door open. Cold air rushed in, carrying snowflakes that melted on Clara's cheeks like tears. She walked through. Outside, the world had turned white. Snow fell steadily from a sky the color of iron, blanketing the wooden buildings and muddy streets of Bitter Creek in deceptive softness. A wagon waited near the station, hitched to a sturdy bay horse. The horse's breath made clouds in the frozen air. "That's Molly." Emmett helped Clara up onto the wagon seat. "She's old and stubborn, but she knows the way home even in weather like this." He climbed up beside her, gathered the reins. "Wait." Clara's hand shot out, grabbing his arm. "I need to know, why did everyone just watch back there when I fell? No one else moved. No one else even tried to help." Emmett was quiet for a moment, his jaw tight. "Ashworth's got money. Money talks in towns like this." He guided Molly out onto the main road. Most folks figured getting involved would mean making an enemy of the richest man in the territory. Easier to look away. Easier to pretend they didn't see. "But you didn't look away." "No, ma'am, I didn't." "Why not?" He was silent for a long time. The only sounds were Molly's hooves crunching through snow and the whisper of flakes falling around them. "Because I know what it's like to be the one on the ground," he finally said. "And I know what it's like when nobody reaches down to help you up." They rode in silence after that. Clara huddled into her thin coat, shivering despite Emmett's offer of a heavy wool blanket from behind the seat. The pain in her feet had dulled to a constant throb, which worried her more than the sharp pain had. She'd heard stories about frostbite, about toes turning black and falling off. "I should have stayed in Boston," she thought. "Should have kept working at the mill. Kept my head down. Kept surviving the way I always had." But the mill had closed, and the boarding house had raised its rates, and winter had come early, and she'd found Theodore's advertisement in a newspaper someone had left behind on the trolley. "Respectable businessman seeks wife of good character. Must be willing to relocate to Wyoming territory. Circumstances no barrier to a woman of strength and determination." She'd written back that same night, hands shaking with hope. 8 months of letters, 8 months of promises, 8 months of believing that somewhere someone wanted her for who she was not, despite what she'd become. All of it lies. "You're thinking about him." Clara startled. "What?" "Ashworth." Emmett kept his eyes on the road ahead. "You got that look. The one people get when they're running through all the ways they should have seen it coming. I should have known better. The letters were too perfect, too exactly what I wanted to hear. That's how they work. Men like him. Emmett's voice hardened. They figure out what you're hungry for, and they feed you just enough to keep you hoping. Don't make it your fault for being hungry. Clara turned to look at him, this strange, quiet man who spoke like he understood things most people pretended not to see. You sound like you've known men like him. Known 'em. Watched 'em operate. Watched 'em break people who trusted them. His jaw flexed. My ma's first husband was one, before Ruth found her. Man named Daniel Foster. Pretty words, easy charm, and a backhand that could knock a grown woman across a room. I'm sorry. Don't be. He's been dead 30 years. Cholera took him 2 months after I was born. Emmett glanced at her. Point is, there's a certain kind of man who looks at someone in need and sees opportunity. Sees something to use. That ain't your failing for trusting him. That's his failing for being what he is. The snow was falling harder now, reducing visibility to a few dozen yards. Molly plodded steadily onward, unfazed by the weather. How much farther? Clara asked. Couple more miles. There's a fork in the road up ahead. After that, it's straight on to the ranch. And if I decide not to stay, if I want to go back to town, find work somewhere. Then I'll drive you back myself, tomorrow or whenever you're ready. Emmett pulled the blanket higher around her shoulders. No strings, Miss Clara. Not now, not ever. You're free to leave the minute you want to. Miss Clara. Not ma'am or miss something more personal, but still respectful. It had been a long time since anyone had said her name like it mattered. You called me Miss Clara. That all right? Yes. She was surprised to find she meant it. Yes, it's all right. They reached the fork in the road. Emmett turned Molly onto the narrower path, and the town of Bitter Creek disappeared behind a curtain of falling snow. Can I ask you something? Clara said. Ask. You said your mother made you promise to help people in need, but you also said she died this past spring. Clara hesitated. That's recent grief. Doesn't it hurt being out here, running the ranch alone? Emmett was quiet for a long time. Every day, he finally said. Every day it hurts. But hurt ain't a reason to stop living. Ain't a reason to close yourself off from the world. He looked at her, and for just a moment, his careful composure cracked. My ma spent her whole life believing in people's better natures even when they disappointed her. She said that's what kept her alive, not just surviving, but actually living, being open to whatever good might come through the door. He turned back to the road. So yeah, it hurts. But I'd rather hurt and still be the man she raised than close myself off and become something she wouldn't recognize. Clara absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. The wagon crested a small rise, and suddenly the ranch spread out before them. A house, small but solid, built from logs and fieldstone. A barn weathered but standing strong. Corrals holding a handful of cattle and horses. Everything was blanketed in white smoke rising from the house's chimney like a promise. That's home, Emmett said quietly. Clara looked at the modest buildings, the snow-covered land stretching to distant mountains, the simple evidence of a life built by hard work and careful tending. It's beautiful, she said. Something shifted in Emmett's expression. Surprise maybe that she'd said such a thing about such a simple place. It ain't much. It's real. Clara heard the conviction in her own voice. It's honest. After 8 months of beautiful lies, honest looks pretty good to me. They pulled up to the house. Emmett helped her down from the wagon, his hands careful around her waist as he steadied her on the snow-slicked ground. Let's get you inside. Get those feet looked at. Clara tried to take a step and gasped as pain shot through her left foot. She would have fallen again, but Emmett caught her. Easy now. His voice was calm. Don't put weight on it. Just lean on me. She let him support her to the door, her pride too exhausted to protest. Inside the house was simple but clean. One main room with a stone fireplace, a table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair by the hearth shelves lined with books and supplies. Everything spoke of careful maintenance, of someone who took pride in making a home out of hard circumstance. Emmett settled her into the rocking chair and immediately began building up the fire. "I've got some doctoring supplies," he said over his shoulder. "My ma taught me basic medicine enough to set bones and treat wounds. Let me look at those feet." "You don't have to, Miss Clara." He turned to face her firelight, catching the silver at his temples. "You've walked 2,000 miles on shoes held together with wire and willpower. You've been betrayed by a man who should have had the decency to never write you in the first place. And you haven't complained once, not about the cold, not about the pain, not about any of it." He crouched down before her, his gray eyes level with hers. "Let me help, please. It's the least I can do for someone who's been through what you've been through today." Clara felt the last of her resistance crumble. "All right," she whispered. "All right." He removed her ruined boots with gentle hands, unwrapping the bloody makeshift bandages she'd made from her petticoat. His face remained carefully neutral, but she saw the tightness around his eyes as he revealed the damage blisters that had broken and bled cuts from walking on split soles, the raw red of flesh that had been wet and cold for too long. "This is going to hurt," he warned. "Gotta clean them proper." Clara gripped the arms of the rocking chair. "I've had worse." He looked at her for a moment, really looked like he was seeing past the exhaustion and the fear to something underneath. "I believe you have," he said quietly. He cleaned her wounds with water he'd heated over the fire, then applied a salve that smelled of herbs and something sharp. He bandaged each foot carefully, his rough hands surprisingly gentle. "My ma made that salve," he said as he worked. "From plants in her garden. Said it could heal just about anything if you believed hard enough. Do you believe?" "I believe it helps. Whether that's the plants or the believing, I ain't smart enough to say." When he finished, Clara's feet still throbbed, but the edge of the pain had dulled. She could feel the warmth of the fire seeping into her bones, could smell something cooking soup maybe, or stew. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. I know I've been difficult. You've been honest." Emmett stood, moving toward the kitchen area. "That ain't the same thing." He ladled soup into a bowl and brought it to her with a chunk of bread that was slightly stale, but still good. Clara took the first bite and had to stop herself from crying out at how good it tasted. Beef and vegetables and herbs, simple but hearty. The food of someone who worked hard and ate what they grew. "When did you eat last?" Emmett asked, watching her. Clara thought about it. 2 days ago. Maybe 3. I ran out of money in Nebraska." His expression didn't change, but something hardened behind his eyes. "Eat slow," he said. "Your stomach ain't used to food. You eat too fast, you'll get sick." She forced herself to slow down, to chew each bite carefully, even though her body screamed at her to devour everything in front of her. Emmett ate his own meal at the table, giving her space, but staying close enough that she didn't feel alone. The fire crackled. The soup warmed her from the inside out. And for the first time since she'd stepped off that train in Boston 3 weeks ago, Clara May Whitfield felt something that might have been the beginning of safety. "I should tell you," she said, breaking the comfortable silence. "I don't know how long I'll stay. I need to find work, pay you back for all of this. I won't be anyone's charity case." "Already said there's nothing to pay back." "And I already said I won't be beholden." She met his eyes. "I've depended on other people's promises my whole life. My father promised we'd always be safe. Then he died in the factory collapse. My mother promised we'd make it through. Then she worked herself to death. Theodore promised me a home and a future. You saw how that ended." She set down her empty bowl. "I'm done trusting promises. I need to make my own way. Need to know that whatever I have, I earned myself." Emmett was quiet for a long moment. "All right," he finally said. "Then how about this? I could use help around the ranch. Cooking, housekeeping, the kind of work I ain't much good at. Place has gotten rough since my ma passed. You're offering me a job. Offering you work for fair pay. Offering you a room of your own and meals while you figure out your next move." He leaned forward. "No charity. Just an arrangement between two people who each have something the other needs." Clara studied him, this quiet cowboy with his weathered face and steady eyes, and hands that had touched her damaged feet like they were something precious. Why do I feel like you're trying to save me even though I told you not to? Because maybe I ain't trying to save you. Maybe I'm just trying to be decent in a world that makes it hard." He stood, gathered the dishes. "Sleep on it. Room's through that door there. It was my ma's. Bed's clean. Lock works if you want to use it." He paused at the kitchen basin, his back to her. "Whatever you decide, Miss Clara, stay or go work or move on, I want you to know something." "What's that?" He turned, and the firelight caught his face in a way that made him look both older and younger than his years. "What happened today on that platform, that wasn't about you being wrong or foolish or not good enough. That was about him being small and scared and not worthy of what you were offering." His voice dropped lower, rougher. "Any man who looks at a woman like you, someone who crossed a continent on hope and determination, someone who stood up to him even after he tried to break her, and sees anything less than strength, that man's a fool. And his opinion ain't worth the breath it took to speak it." Clara felt tears prick her eyes for the first time all day. "You don't know me well enough to say that." "I know enough." Emmett headed toward the door that must have led to his own room. "Get some sleep, Miss Clara. Tomorrow's a new day. Whatever you decide to do with it, at least you'll decide it rested and warm." He paused at the threshold. "And Miss Clara." "Yes." "Those boots of yours. The ruined ones." He nodded toward where he'd set them by the fire to dry. "Don't throw them away just yet." "Why not?" "They're done. Can't be fixed." Something almost like a smile crossed his weathered face. "Maybe. But they brought you here. Brought you through 2,000 miles of hard road to end up in this place at this moment. Seems to me that's worth remembering." He was gone before she could respond, closing the door quietly behind him. Clara sat alone in the firelight, her bandaged feet warm for the first time in weeks, her stomach full for the first time in days. She looked at her ruined boots, at the split seams and the worn-through soles, and the bloodstains that would never wash out. They brought you here. She didn't know yet if here was somewhere worth being brought to. Didn't know if Emmett Callahan's kindness was real or just another beautiful lie waiting to reveal itself. Didn't know if she had the strength to start over again in this frozen foreign place. But she knew this: she was still alive, still fighting, still standing or sitting at least when the day had tried its best to knock her down for good. And tomorrow she would decide what to do with that. She limped to the bedroom he'd offered, found it small but clean, with a quilt that smelled of lavender and a window that looked out on the falling snow. She lay down without undressing, too exhausted to do more than pull the quilt over her battered body. Outside, the wind howled, and the snow fell, and the world turned white with winter's cold indifference. But inside this small room, in this stranger's house, Clara May Whitfield felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Not hope, not yet. But the possibility that hope might exist somewhere waiting for her to be strong enough to reach for it again. She closed her eyes. Sleep came slowly, but when it finally arrived, it brought no dreams. Just darkness and warmth, and the distant sound of a man moving quietly through a house that had been empty too long and wasn't anymore. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of boots on wooden floors. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Her body expected the hard bench of a train car, the rocking motion, the endless clatter of wheels on tracks. Instead, she found stillness, warmth, and a quilt that smelled of lavender. Then memory crashed back. Theodore's cold eyes, the station floor against her knees, a stranger's calloused hand reaching down. She sat up too fast, and pain shot through her bandaged feet. The room was small, simple, filled with gray morning light filtering through frost-covered windows. Someone had been here while she slept. A pitcher of water sat on the dresser that hadn't been there before, along with a clean towel and a bar of soap. Clara limped to the door and opened it slowly. Emmett stood at the stove, his back to her, stirring something in a cast-iron skillet. He'd already been outside, his boots were wet with melted snow, and there was hay clinging to his coat sleeve. "Morning." He didn't turn around. "Coffee's ready. Eggs if you want them." "How long have you been up?" "Since 5. Stock don't feed itself even in weather like this." Clara moved toward the table, testing her weight on her damaged feet. The pain was still there, but duller now, more manageable. Whatever had been in that salve was working. "You should have woken me. I said I'd work for my keep." "You also hadn't slept proper in 3 weeks." Emmett finally turned, and Clara saw the dark circles under his eyes. He hadn't slept well either. "Figured one more morning wouldn't hurt." He set a plate in front of her. Eggs fried crisp at the edges, bread toasted over the fire. More food than she'd seen in days. "Eat," he said. "Then we'll talk about arrangements." Clara ate. She tried to go slow, remembering his warning from the night before, but hunger won out. She cleared the plate in minutes, then sat back slightly embarrassed by her own desperation. "When did you last have a proper meal?" Emmett asked. "Before yesterday, I mean." "I told you, Nebraska. I mean before you got on that train, before you left Boston." Clara thought about it. Really thought. "I don't remember. There was never enough. After the mill closed, I was lucky to eat once a day." Something flickered across Emmett's face. Not pity, she was learning to recognize the difference. Something harder. Anger, maybe, at circumstances that had brought her to this point. "Well," he poured coffee for both of them. "You'll eat proper here. 3 meals a day more if you need it. That ain't charity," he added before she could protest. "That's just sense. Can't work if you're starving." They drank coffee in silence. Outside the wind had died down, but snow still fell steadily, piling against the windows in soft drifts. "I've been thinking," Clara said finally, "about what you offered, the work arrangement. And I'll take it, for now." She met his eyes. "But I want to be clear about terms. I work, you pay me fair wages. I'm not a guest. I'm not a project for you to fix. I'm an employee." "Fair enough." "And I want to know exactly what's expected. What I'll be doing, how long I'll be doing it, what happens when I've saved enough to move on." Emmett leaned back in his chair. "You always this direct?" "Life's too short for games, Mr. Callahan. I've had enough of pretty words and hidden meanings to last a lifetime." Something that might have been respect flickered in his gray eyes. "All right. Here's what I need. Cooking I can make enough to survive, but that's about it. Housekeeping place has gotten rough since Ma passed, and I ain't good at the detail work. Maybe some help with the garden come spring if you're still here." "What about wages?" $1 a week plus room and board. It ain't much, but it's more than I made at the mill." Clara extended her hand. "We have a deal, Mr. Callahan." He took her hand. His grip was firm, warm, brief. "One more thing," he said. "You're gonna need proper boots. Those things you came in with ain't fit for anything but burning. I can't afford—" "I've got credit at the general store in town. You can pay me back from your wages." He held up a hand to stop her protest. "It ain't charity, it's practical. Can't have you losing toes to frostbite because you're too proud to accept a loan." Clara wanted to argue. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse to maintain her independence, to prove she didn't need anyone's help. But she looked at her bandaged feet, thought about the 6 miles between here and town, thought about what would happen if she tried to walk that distance in ruined shoes in winter weather. "Fine," she said, "but I'm keeping track, every penny." "Wouldn't expect anything less." The next few days passed in a rhythm Clara hadn't expected. She woke early, made breakfast, cleaned, while Emmett tended to the livestock. He returned for midday meal, then went back out until dark. Evenings they spent in the main room, him reading or mending equipment, her learning the layout of the kitchen, the location of supplies, the particular quirks of a house that had been shaped by someone else's hands. She found traces of his mother everywhere. Herbs hanging from the rafters, dried but still fragrant. A journal of recipes and remedies tucked behind the flower bin. Quilts folded in a cedar chest, each one stitched with careful patterns. A woman's presence lingering like perfume in an empty room. She was a healer, Emmett said one evening when he caught Clara reading the remedy journal. Not official, no training or credentials, just knowledge passed down from Ruth and from Ruth's mother before her. People came from miles around when they were sick or hurt. Ma never turned anyone away. She sounds remarkable. She was. He stared into the fire. Strongest woman I ever knew. Survived things that would have broken most people. But she never got hard from it. Never stopped believing in folks, even when they gave her every reason to. Clara thought about her own mother, The way she'd worked 16-hour days at the laundry, hands raw and bleeding just to keep them fed. The way she'd smiled anyway, told stories anyway, made Clara believe that better things were coming even when they never did. "My mother was like that," she said quietly. "Kept hoping right up until the end." "What happened to her?" "Exhaustion. The doctors called it heart failure, but I know what really killed her. Too much work, too little food, too many years of carrying weight that should have been shared." Clara's voice hardened. "My father died in a factory collapse when I was 12. After that, it was just us. She did everything she could to keep me safe, keep me educated, keep me believing that hard work would lead somewhere better. Did it? It led me here." Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Sitting in a stranger's house in Wyoming territory, with nothing but the clothes on my back and feet that might never heal properly. That ain't nothing." Emmett's voice was firm. "You made it. 2,000 miles through winter with everything against you, and you made it. That's something. That's a lot, actually." Clara looked at him. Firelight caught the silver at his temples, the lines around his eyes, the quiet strength in his weathered face. "Why do you do that?" she asked. "Do what?" "See good things where most people would see failure." He was quiet for a long moment. "Because I know what failure looks like. Real failure. And it ain't a woman who crossed a continent on hope and ended up somewhere she didn't expect. It's a man who crosses the street to avoid helping someone in need. It's someone who has everything and still can't be decent." He paused. "You ain't failed, Miss Clara. You've survived. And now you're gonna build something new. That's not failure. That's just starting over." On the fourth day, the snow stopped. Clara stood at the window, watching the world transform. Where there had been nothing but white, now there were shapes emerging, the dark lines of fences, the red of the barn, the distant purple of mountains, against a sky so blue it hurt to look at. "Weather's clearing," Emmett said, pulling on his coat. "We should go to town. Get you those boots." Clara's stomach tightened. Town meant people. People meant questions, stares, whispers. Word of what had happened at the station must have spread by now. "I don't know if that's a good idea." "You can't hide here forever." "I'm not hiding. I'm just—" She trailed off, unable to find a word that didn't sound like hiding. "Miss Clara." Emmett's voice was gentle but firm. "Whatever happened at that station, it wasn't your fault. You got nothing to be ashamed of. And the longer you wait to show your face, the more power you give to people like Ashworth." "Easy for you to say. You're not the one they're whispering about." "No, I'm the one who took you in." He met her eyes. "You think they ain't whispering about that, ain't speculating about what kind of arrangement we got here?" Clara hadn't thought about it, hadn't considered that his kindness might cost him something too. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cause trouble for you." "You didn't cause anything. Ashworth caused it. The gossips caused it. All you did was exist." He opened the door. "Now come on, let's give them something real to talk about." The ride to town was cold but clear. Clara wore one of Emmett's mother's old coats, too big but warm, and her feet were wrapped in layers of cloth inside her ruined boots. She felt ridiculous, but she was beyond caring about appearances. Bitter Creek looked different in daylight without the blur of falling snow. Smaller than she'd imagined. A main street with wooden buildings lining both sides. A church at one end, steeple reaching toward the endless sky. A general store, a land office, two saloons facing each other like old enemies. People stopped and stared as Emmett's wagon rolled through. Clara kept her eyes forward, her spine straight, her hands folded in her lap. She could feel their gazes like physical weight. Could hear the whispers starting even before they'd passed. "That's her. The mail-order bride. Came all this way for Ashworth and he turned her out like trash. Living with Callahan now. You know what that means." "Ignore them," Emmett said quietly. "They ain't worth your attention." They stopped in front of the general store. Emmett helped her down from the wagon, his hand steady on her elbow, and they walked inside together. The store was larger than it looked from outside, crowded with everything from fabric to flour to farm equipment. A man behind the counter looked up as they entered, stout, with impressive sideburns and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Emmett Callahan. His voice was carefully neutral. "Been a while since you came to town." "Patterson." Emmett nodded. "This is Miss Clara Whitfield. She needs boots. Something sturdy for ranch work." Patterson's eyes flickered over Clara, taking in her borrowed coat, her bandaged feet, the careful way she held herself. Whatever he thought, he kept his face blank. "Work boots or ladies' wear?" "Work boots," Clara said before Emmett could answer. "Something that'll last." Patterson nodded and disappeared into the back. He returned with 3 pairs in varying sizes, all practical brown leather with good thick soles. Clara tried the smallest pair. They fit well, roomy enough for thick socks, but not so large she'd stumble. The leather was stiff and would need breaking in, but they were solid. Real. "How much?" she asked. $2. Emmett reached for his coin purse, but Clara stopped him with a hand on his arm. "This is a loan," she said firmly. "I'll pay you back from my wages." "I know." "I mean it. Every cent." "I know." Patterson watched this exchange with raised eyebrows. "You two got an arrangement." "Miss Whitfield is working at the ranch," Emmett said. "Cooking and housekeeping. Fair wages for fair work." "That's so." Patterson's tone was carefully neutral. "Interesting timing considering what happened last week." "What happened last week is between Miss Whitfield and the man who lied to her." Emmett's voice hardened. "Ain't got nothing to do with our arrangement." The door opened behind them. Clara turned and felt her stomach drop. Theodore Ashworth stood in the entrance, Miss Henderson on his arm. He was dressed impeccably as always, not a hair out of place, his expression one of polished surprise. "Well," he said, his voice carrying through the suddenly silent store, "if it isn't the desperate bride and her rescuer." Clara felt Emmett go rigid beside her. "Ashworth." Emmett's voice was flat. "Something you need?" "Just supplies. Same as everyone else." Theodore smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Although I must say I'm surprised to see Miss... What was it again? I'm afraid I've forgotten." "You haven't forgotten anything." Clara heard the steel in her own voice. "You just wish you could." Theodore's smile flickered. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean." "I'm sure you do." Clara took a step forward, and she felt something shift in the room, the watchers leaning in the air, growing thick with tension. 8 months of letters, Theodore. 8 months of promises. You know exactly who I am. "Miss..." Theodore's voice turned cold. "I've already explained that there's been some misunderstanding. Whatever correspondence you think we shared. The correspondence is dated and signed in your hand." Clara's heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. "I have every letter you sent me, every promise you made, every lie you told." "Lies?" Miss Henderson's voice was sharp. "Theodore, what is she talking about?" "Nothing, darling. She's clearly disturbed. Delusional, as I said." Theodore patted Miss Henderson's hand, but his eyes never left Clara. "Some women simply can't accept rejection gracefully." "Rejection?" Clara laughed, and the sound was bitter as winter wind. "You didn't reject me, Theodore. You abandoned me. You brought me 2,000 miles with promises of a home and a life, and then you threw me away like garbage because I didn't look pretty enough after 3 weeks on a train." The store had gone completely silent. Even Patterson had stopped pretending to arrange stock. "Your letter said you wanted someone strong," Clara continued. "Someone who could build a life from nothing. Someone whose character mattered more than circumstances." She pulled the worn bundle of letters from her pocket. "Should I read them aloud? Let everyone hear exactly what you promised?" Theodore's face went white. "That's enough." His voice was sharp. "I don't know where you got those forgeries, but..." "Forgeries." Emmett spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, but something in it made Theodore take a step back. "Interesting choice of words. Seems to me a man who's telling the truth don't need to call evidence fake before anyone's even examined it. This is none of your concern, Callahan. You made it my concern when you left a woman to freeze on a station platform in the middle of winter." Emmett stepped forward, putting himself between Clara and Theodore. Whatever lies you want to tell yourself, that's your business. But don't come in here pretending you're the victim. Theodore's jaw tightened. Caroline, let's go. I won't stand here being insulted by... By who? Theodore. Miss Henderson's voice was ice. She'd pulled away from his arm, her face pale beneath her perfect makeup. By the woman you apparently courted for 8 months, by the man who had enough decency to help her when you wouldn't... Caroline, I want to see the letters. The words hung in the air. Theodore's expression flickered panic, quickly hidden. They're forgeries, I told you. Then you won't mind proving it. Miss Henderson held out her gloved hand. May I, Miss Whitfield? Clara hesitated. These letters were all she had evidence of what she'd been promised proof that she wasn't delusional or desperate or any of the things Theodore wanted people to believe. But something in Miss Henderson's face made her decide. She handed over the bundle. Miss Henderson read in silence. Her expression didn't change, but Clara watched the color drain from her face, watched her hands tighten on the worn paper. These are dated, she said finally. Starting 8 months ago. Ending 2 weeks before she arrived. She looked up at Theodore. The handwriting is yours. I'd know it anywhere. Caroline, please. You promised to marry her. Miss Henderson's voice was barely a whisper. You sent her money for a train ticket. You told her you wanted someone strong, someone who could build a life with you. She looked at Clara, then back at Theodore. You told me you'd never been engaged. You told me I was the first woman you'd ever considered marrying. You are. This was just... It was nothing. A diversion. I never intended... to go through with it. Clara cut in. No. You intended to keep me as a backup plan in case Miss Henderson didn't work out. And when she did, you threw me away and tried to destroy my reputation so no one would believe me. Miss Henderson's hand trembled as she returned the letters to Clara. I apologize, she said stiffly, for what I said at the station, for what I assumed about you. She turned to Theodore. And I apologize to myself for believing your lies. She walked out of the store without looking back. Theodore stood frozen, his perfect composure finally cracked. His eyes darted between Clara and Emmett and Patterson and the door through which his future had just disappeared. You! He rounded on Clara, his voice shaking with fury. You've ruined everything. I had everything I wanted and I didn't do anything. Clara's voice was calm, now steady. You ruined yourself, Theodore. All I did was tell the truth. Theodore lunged forward, hand raised. Emmett moved faster. He caught Theodore's wrist twisted, and suddenly Theodore was bent over the counterarm pinned behind his back, gasping in pain. That's enough. Emmett's voice was cold as the winter outside. You raise your hand to her again, you'll pull back a stump. Get off me. I'll have you arrested for assault. Go ahead and try. Emmett released him, stepping back but keeping himself between Theodore and Clara. Sheriff Campbell's known me 30 years. Known you for 3. Who you think he's gonna believe? Theodore straightened, rubbing his wrist. His face was twisted with humiliation and rage. This isn't over, he spat. Neither of you knows what you've done. I have powerful friends. I'll destroy you both. You can try. Emmett's voice was utterly flat. But I'd think careful before you do. Man with a reputation for lying to women, forgery, assault. Might find those powerful friends ain't so friendly anymore. Theodore stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Silence settled over the store. Patterson let out a long breath. Well, that's the most excitement we've had since the Johansson boys set the livery on fire. Clara realized her hands were shaking. The rush of confrontation was fading, leaving her hollow and trembling. Are you all right? Emmett's voice was close to her ear. I don't know. She looked down at the letters still clutched in her hands. I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I just... Stood up for yourself, told the truth, made a powerful man look like the fool he is. Yes, all of that. Emmett's weathered face softened. That took courage, Miss Clara. More courage than most people find in a lifetime. Patterson cleared his throat. The boots, Miss Whitfield. They're yours. On the house. Clara blinked. I couldn't. Consider it my contribution to justice. Patterson was almost smiling. Anyone who can make Theodore Ashworth turn that particular shade of purple deserves a free pair of boots. They left the store with Clara wearing her new boots and carrying her ruined ones wrapped in brown paper. Her feet still hurt, but the pain was distant now, overshadowed by something else, a fierce, burning pride she hadn't felt in years. She had stood up. She had told the truth. And for once, the truth had mattered. Outside, word had clearly spread. People clustered in groups along the boardwalk, whispering and pointing. But their expressions were different than before. Less judgment, more curiosity. A few women nodded at Clara as she passed. One elderly man tipped his hat. You've made an impression, Emmett said quietly as they walked toward the wagon. I've made enemies. Same thing sometimes. They were almost to the wagon when a woman stepped into their path. She was perhaps 50, substantial in both body and presence, wearing a practical wool coat and a hat with a single sensible feather. Emmett Callahan. Her voice was warm but firm. I was starting to think you'd become a hermit. Mrs. Brennan. Emmett actually smiled, the first real smile Clara had seen from him. Just been busy at the ranch. So I've heard. Mrs. Brennan's sharp eyes shifted to Clara. And this must be Miss Whitfield. The whole town's talking about you, dear. Clara braced herself for judgment. I imagine they are. Don't worry. Most of what they're saying is complimentary. Mrs. Brennan's expression softened. What that snake Ashworth did to you was shameful. I said so to his face when he tried to eat at my hotel last week. Your hotel. Martha Brennan. I own the Bitter Creek Hotel and the restaurant attached. She took Clara's hand in both of hers. If you ever need work, you come see me. I can always use someone with spine, and from what I hear, you've got plenty. That's very kind. It's not kind. It's practical. Mrs. Brennan winked. But we can pretend it's kind if it makes you feel better. She turned to Emmett. You take care of this girl, Emmett Callahan. She's been through enough. Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Brennan patted Clara's arm and swept away a force of nature in wool and feathers. She seems formidable, Clara said. She is. Her husband died 10 years ago, left her with nothing but debts and a failing hotel. She turned it into the most successful business in town through pure, stubborn determination. Emmett helped Clara up onto the wagon seat. If Mrs. Brennan likes you, you've got an ally worth having. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Clara leaned against the wagon seat, exhaustion catching up with her now that the adrenaline had faded. What happens now? She asked. What do you mean? Theodore. He said this wasn't over. He said he'd destroy us. Emmett was quiet for a moment. Maybe he'll try. Probably he'll try. But Ashworth's the kind of man who fights with money and influence, not fists. And he just lost his best source of both when Miss Henderson walked out. You think she'll really leave him? I think she already has. Emmett guided Molly around a deep snowdrift. Woman like that, rich, connected, used to getting what she wants. She ain't gonna stay with a man who made her look foolish in public. Her pride won't allow it. So Theodore loses everything because of me. Theodore loses everything because of himself. Emmett's voice was firm. All you did was tell the truth. He's the one who built a castle of lies and then acted surprised when it fell down. Clara absorbed this. It made sense logically. But part of her still felt responsible, still carried the weight of guilt for existing, for complicating things, for being the spark that lit the fire. Miss Clara. Emmett's voice was gentle. I'm going to say something, and I want you to hear it. All right? You've spent your whole life being told you're a burden. Being told you take up too much space, ask for too much cause, too many problems. He looked at her, those gray eyes steady as stone. But that's a lie. You ain't a burden. You're a person. And you got every right to exist, to take up space, to speak the truth, same as anyone else. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, the first since she'd collapsed on that station platform. You don't know that. You don't know what I've... I know enough. I know you crossed 2,000 miles on nothing but hope. I know you stood up to a man twice your size and social standing and made him back down. I know you've been through hell, and you're still standing." He turned back to the road. "That ain't being a burden, that's being strong. And don't let anyone, especially yourself, tell you different." They didn't speak again until they reached the ranch. Clara climbed down from the wagon, her new boots solid on the frozen ground, and stood looking at the small house that had somehow become her refuge. "Thank you," she said. "For today. For standing up for me in the store. For everything." Emmett nodded. "That's what decent people do." "Not everyone's decent. Not everyone would have done what you did." "No." He started unhitching Molly from the wagon. "But my ma taught me you can't control what other people do. You can only control what you do, and I'd rather die being the man who helped than live being the man who walked away." That night Clara lay awake in her small room, listening to the wind outside and the settling sounds of the house. She thought about Theodore's face when Miss Henderson walked out, thought about Mrs. Brennan's warm handshake, thought about Emmett Callahan standing between her and danger like it was the most natural thing in the world. She thought about her mother working herself to death in that Boston laundry, about her father crushed under falling machinery because someone decided safety measures cost too much money. She thought about the letters in her pocket, 8 months of beautiful lies that had carried her across a continent. And she thought about new boots, solid and real on feet that were finally beginning to heal. Something was changing inside her. Something she couldn't name yet. The shell she'd built around herself, the armor of expecting nothing, trusting no one, surviving on pure, stubborn determination was starting to crack. It terrified her. But beneath the terror was something else. Something that felt almost like hope. She fell asleep, still trying to decide if that was a gift or a trap. Outside, the wind howled across the prairie, and somewhere in the darkness, a wolf called to its pack, long and mournful and wild. And in the next room, Emmett Callahan lay awake too, staring at the ceiling, wondering what he'd gotten himself into, and knowing somehow that whatever it was, he wouldn't change a thing. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm Clara hadn't expected to find comforting. She woke before dawn, made breakfast, cleaned while Emmett worked the ranch. They ate midday meal together, spoke about practical things, the weather, the livestock supplies that needed ordering. Evenings they spent in the main room, him reading or mending tack, her learning the particular language of a frontier kitchen. She was getting stronger. Her feet healed the blisters, fading to tough new skin. Her hands grew calloused from work. The hollow places in her body filled out as regular meals did their work. But it was more than physical. Something inside her was changing too. Some wall she'd built years ago was developing cracks, letting in light she wasn't sure she was ready for. "You're thinking too loud," Emmett said one evening, not looking up from the harness he was repairing. "Can hear it from over here." Clara startled. She'd been staring into the fire, lost in thoughts she couldn't quite name. "Sorry, just remembering." "Remembering what?" She considered not answering, but something about the quiet firelight and the comfortable silence made her want to speak. "My mother used to say that hope was a dangerous thing. Said it made you soft, made you expect good things that never came." Clara pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "After my father died, she stopped hoping. Just survived day to day until surviving was all she knew how to do." "You think she was right?" "I think she was tired. Tired of being disappointed. Tired of believing in things that never happened." Clara paused. "I understood when she said it. After Theodore, I understood perfectly." Emmett set down the harness. "And now I don't know." Clara looked at him, at this quiet man who'd extended kindness without asking for anything in return. "You make it hard to stop hoping, Mr. Callahan, and that scares me more than anything Theodore did." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, moved to the shelf, and pulled down a small wooden box. "My ma left me this when she died." He opened the box and lifted out a folded piece of paper yellow with age. "It's the only letter she ever got from Ruth, the woman who saved her. Ruth wrote it the day before she died." He handed it to Clara. The handwriting was shaky, the ink faded. But the words were clear. Margaret, I'm writing this because tomorrow the doctor says I won't wake up, and there are things I need you to know. When I found you on that Sacramento street half dead with a baby in your arms, I wasn't being kind. I was being selfish. I was lonely and scared, and you gave me someone to care about. Someone who needed me. You think I saved you, but the truth is we saved each other. That's what hope does, Margaret. It doesn't make us soft. It connects us to each other. It reminds us we're not alone. Don't ever stop hoping even when it hurts, especially when it hurts, because that's when hope matters most. All my love, Ruth. Clara read it twice, her throat tight. She kept this for 40 years, Emmett said quietly. Read it every time life got hard. Said it reminded her what she was fighting for. Why are you showing me this? Because you remind me of her. My ma, I mean. The way you hold yourself like you're waiting for the next blow. The way you don't trust good things. He took the letter back, folding it carefully. She spent half her life expecting the worst, and she was right to the worst kept happening. But she never stopped hoping, never stopped believing that somewhere someday things would be different. And were they different? Sometimes. Not always. Emmett returned the box to its shelf. But the hoping itself, that's what kept her alive. Not because good things always came, but because believing they might come gave her a reason to keep going. Clara stared into the fire, the words of Ruth's letter echoing in her mind. We saved each other. She'd never thought of it that way. Never considered that needing help might be its own kind of gift, that accepting kindness might give the giver something too. Mr. Callahan, Emmett. He settled back into his chair. I think we know each other well enough for that now. Emmett. The name felt different in her mouth, more personal, more dangerous. Why did you never remarry? After your engagement fell through. He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Sarah. That was her name, she wasn't wrong to leave, he finally said. I wasn't ready for a wife. I was young, angry, carrying too much from the war to be any good to anyone. The war. Joined up in 61, 16 years old, lying about my age because I wanted to be a hero. His voice went flat. 4 years later I came home knowing there ain't no such thing as heroes. Just survivors and the dead. Clara watched his face, saw the old pain surface and submerge again like something dangerous, swimming just beneath still water. I was at Antietam, Gettysburg, the wilderness. His hands clenched around the harness leather. Watched boys younger than me die screaming for their mothers. Killed men who were probably just as scared as I was. And for what? So politicians could argue about things we'd already paid for in blood. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago. But his eyes said different. Point is, when I came back, I wasn't the same person who left. Sarah saw that. She wanted the boy she'd known before, and that boy was dead. She was right to go looking for someone else. And you've been alone ever since. Had my ma, had the ranch, had enough to keep busy. He looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Never met anyone who made me want to try again. Never met anyone who understood what it means to survive something that should have killed you. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Neither of them was ready to examine. Clara looked away first. It's late, she said. I should... Yeah. Emmett stood gathering the harness. Yeah, me too. They retreated to their separate rooms, and Clara lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, feeling something shifting inside her that she didn't have a name for yet. 3 days later, everything changed. Clara was alone in the house, kneading bread dough when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Her heart jumped. Emmett had gone to check the cattle in the far pasture and wasn't expected back until evening. She moved to the window, wiping flour from her hands. A rider was approaching from the south. Not Emmett, wrong horse, wrong silhouette. A big man on a raw-boned gray riding hard despite the cold. Clara remembered Emmett's warning from her first day. You see anyone coming up the road, you come find me. But Emmett was miles away, and the rider was almost to the house. She looked around the main room, searching for something she could use as a weapon. Her eyes landed on the fire poker, heavy iron Goodreach. She grabbed it and moved to stand beside the door, heart pounding. The hoofbeats stopped outside. Boots hit frozen ground. Footsteps approached the porch. A knock, heavy, demanding. "Miss Whitfield." A man's voice, rough and unfamiliar. "I know you're in there. Saw you through the window." Clara didn't answer. Her grip tightened on the poker. "I ain't here to hurt you. Got a message from Mr. Ashworth." Theodore. Of course. He'd said it wasn't over, and he'd meant it. "Leave it on the porch," Clara called. "I'll get it after you're gone." A laugh, harsh and humorless. "Ain't that kind of message, ma'am. Mr. Ashworth wants to discuss terms, face to face. Then he can come discuss them himself instead of sending hired men." "Oh, I ain't hired, least not the way you're thinking." The voice moved closer to the door. "Name's Silas Kruger. Theodore Ashworth is my cousin. And you've caused my family a lot of trouble." Clara's blood went cold. "Miss Henderson called off the engagement." Kruger continued. "Packed up and went back to Denver. Took her daddy's money and connections with her. Theodore's ruined socially, financially, every way that matters." A pause. "He blames you. And when an Ashworth blames someone, that someone tends to have accidents." "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning. Theodore wanted me to make you disappear. Make it look like you got lost in a snowstorm, or fell through river ice, or whatever else folks out here die of." Kruger's voice hardened. "But I ain't a murderer. So here's what's gonna happen instead. You're gonna pack whatever you can carry, and you're gonna come with me. I'll put you on a train heading east. You disappear. Theodore gets his satisfaction, nobody has to die. And if I refuse?" Silence. Then Theodore sends someone who ain't as particular as I am." Clara's mind raced. She could scream, but there was no one to hear. She could run, but he'd catch her before she made it 100 yards. She could fight, but he was bigger, stronger, probably armed. "I need a minute to pack," she said, stalling. "You got 5. Then I'm coming in whether you open the door or not." Clara moved quickly, silently away from the door. Her eyes swept the room looking for options. The back door. There was a back door that led out toward the barn. She grabbed her coat from the hook, shoved her feet into her new boots. The fire poker was too big to hide, so she set it down, but her eyes caught on something else, a small knife Emmett used for cutting leather. She slipped it into her coat pocket. "Time's up, Miss Whitfield." The front door burst open. Clara didn't wait to see Kruger's face. She ran. Out the back door, across the frozen yard toward the barn. Her boots slipped on icy patches, but she kept her feet kept moving. Behind her she heard Kruger curse, heard his heavy footsteps giving chase. The barn door was partially open. She slipped through the gap into the dim interior that smelled of hay and horses. Molly whinnied, startled by the sudden intrusion. "Easy, girl." Clara's voice shook. "Easy." She looked around frantically. The barn was full of tools, but nothing she could use effectively against a bigger, stronger opponent. Her eyes landed on the ladder leading up to the hayloft. She climbed. Below, the barn door crashed open. "Miss Whitfield." Kruger's voice echoed in the enclosed space. "This is foolish. I told you I ain't gonna hurt you. Just come down and we'll settle this peaceful." Clara pressed herself against a hay bale, barely breathing. Through gaps in the loft floor, she could see Kruger moving below, checking behind stalls, looking under equipment. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." His voice was getting closer to the ladder. "Theodore wants you gone. I'm offering you a chance to go gentle. The alternative ain't pretty." His boot hit the first rung of the ladder. Clara pulled the knife from her pocket. It was small, meant for cutting leather, not fighting, but it was all she had. Kruger's head appeared above the loft floor. Clara struck. The blade caught him across the cheek, a shallow cut more startling than damaging. But it was enough. Kruger jerked back, lost his grip on the ladder, and fell. The crash shook the barn. Molly screamed and kicked at her stall door. Clara didn't wait to see if Kruger was unconscious or just stunned. She scrambled down the ladder on the opposite side, dodged around his sprawled form, and ran for the door. Outside, his horse stood waiting, reins trailing in the snow. Clara had never ridden alone. Had barely ridden at all, just a few lessons from Emmett on gentle Molly. But Kruger was already stirring behind her, groaning, cursing. She grabbed the reins, shoved her foot into the stirrup, and hauled herself onto the horse's back. "Go!" she gasped, kicking desperately. "Go, go, go!" The horse lunged forward. Clara clung to the saddle horn, fighting to stay mounted as the animal bolted down the road. She had no idea where she was going, no plan beyond getting away, putting distance between herself and the man who'd come to make her disappear. The ranch fell away behind her. The road stretched ahead, white with snow, empty in all directions. She rode. Emmett found her an hour later, or she found him, she wasn't sure which. His face went white when he saw her coming, clinging to the back of a strange horse, shaking with cold and terror. "Clara." He was off his own horse in an instant, catching her as she half fell from the saddle. "What happened? Whose horse is this?" Man came. Her teeth were chattering so hard she could barely speak. "Said his name was Kruger. Theodore's cousin. Wanted to take me away. Make me disappear." Emmett's expression went cold in a way she'd never seen before. "Did he hurt you?" "No, I cut him." Clara held up the knife still clutched in her frozen hand. "With this." Cut his face and ran. Something passed through Emmett's eyes, pride maybe, or relief. "You cut him and ran. Good. That's good." He pulled her close, and she realized she was shaking, not just from cold, but from the aftermath of fear. "You're safe now. I've got you." "He's still there. At the ranch. He might—" "He won't stay. Not after you got away and took his horse." Emmett guided her toward his own mount. "Come on. We're going to town. Gonna find Sheriff Campbell and report this." "Theodore will deny everything. He'll say Kruger was acting alone." "Maybe, but there'll be a record now, a complaint on file. If anything happens to you after this, everyone will know exactly who to blame." They rode double into Bitter Creek. Clara pressed against Emmett's back, her arms wrapped around his waist. She'd never been this close to him before, never felt the solid warmth of him against her body. It should have felt wrong, improper. Instead, it felt like the only safe place in the world. Sheriff Campbell was an older man with tired eyes and a lawman's skepticism. But he listened to Clara's story without interrupting, took notes in a small leather book, and sent a deputy out to the ranch to check for Kruger. "He's gone," the deputy reported an hour later. "Blood on the barn floor where Miss Whitfield said. Horse tracks heading south, moving fast." Campbell closed his notebook. "I'll send word to the territorial marshal. Kruger's got a history, bar fights, threats, one accusation of assault that never stuck. If he crosses my path, I'll arrest him." "And Theodore?" Clara asked. "He's the one who sent Kruger." "You got proof of that?" Kruger said. "Hearsay." Campbell's voice was kind but firm. "I believe you, Miss Whitfield, but belief ain't evidence. Unless Kruger's willing to testify against his cousin, which he ain't gonna be, there's nothing I can do about Ashworth." Clara felt her brief hope crumble. So he just gets away with it. For now, maybe forever. Campbell stood, signaling the end of the conversation. "But I want you to know something. This town talks, and they've been talking plenty since you arrived. Most of them think you're either brave as hell or crazy as a bedbug. Either way, they're watching. If something happens to you now, everyone's gonna know who did it. And that's supposed to protect me. Sometimes it does." Campbell put on his hat. Sometimes knowing everyone's watching is enough to make a man think twice. Outside the sheriff's office, the afternoon was fading toward evening. Clara stood on the boardwalk, watching the sky turn colors she didn't have names for: orange and purple, and the deep blue of approaching night. "We can't go back to the ranch tonight," Emmett said, "not knowing if Kruger's lurking out there somewhere." "Then where?" "Mrs. Brennan's got rooms at the hotel. We'll stay there tonight, figure out what to do tomorrow." "Emmett?" Clara turned to face him. "This isn't going to stop, is it? Theodore's not going to give up?" He didn't answer immediately. The silence said everything. "I'm putting you in danger," Clara continued. "Every day I stay, I'm making you a target. He hates me, and now he hates you too for taking me in. Let him hate. I ain't scared of Theodore Ashworth. Maybe you should be. He's got money connections, family willing to do his dirty work." Clara's voice cracked. "I should leave. Get on a train like Kruger wanted. Just go somewhere Theodore can't reach. Where? Emmett's voice was sharp. Where you gonna go that a man with money can't find you? What you gonna do when you get there, start over again with nothing all by yourself? It's what I've been doing my whole life. And how's that working out for you? The question hit like a blow. Clara felt tears sting her eyes and fought them back. That's not fair. No, it ain't. Emmett's voice softened. But neither is you running away. Neither is letting Theodore Ashworth win because you're scared of what he might do. I'm not scared for me. The words came out before Clara could stop them. I'm scared for you. I'm scared that one day Kruger or someone like him is going to show up and you're going to get hurt because of me. Because you were kind enough to help someone who should have just kept walking. Emmett took her hands. His grip was warm, solid, real. Miss Clara. His voice was quiet, rough, with something she couldn't name. Listen to me. I spent 10 years after the war being scared. Scared of losing people. Scared of caring too much. Scared of what would happen if I let anyone get close. It was a miserable way to live. Safe, but miserable. He squeezed her hands. When my ma died, I thought that was it. Thought I'd spend the rest of my days alone on that ranch, waiting to die. He met her eyes. Then you showed up. Half dead with frozen feet, and too proud to accept help. And something changed. Emmett. I ain't asking you to stay forever. Ain't asking you for anything you don't want to give. But I'm telling you that whatever happens with Theodore, whatever comes next, I'd rather face it with you than be safe alone. Clara felt something break inside her. Not the bad kind of breaking, not the shattering she'd felt on that station platform. This was different. This was a wall coming down a door, opening a barrier she'd built years ago, finally giving way. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I don't know how to trust, how to hope, how to believe good things can happen without waiting for them to fall apart. Neither do I. Emmett's weathered face softened. But maybe we can figure it out together. Mrs. Brennan took one look at them, standing in her hotel lobby, and demanded the entire story. When Clara finished, the older woman's face was flushed with fury. That snake! That miserable, vindictive snake! She paced the small parlor she'd led them to. Sending his cousin to terrorize a woman alone. If I had him here right now, I'd... Mrs. Brennan. Emmett's voice was calm. What we need is a place to stay tonight. Of course you have it. Mrs. Brennan stopped pacing. 2 rooms best I've got. On the house, and don't you dare argue. Mrs. Brennan. I said don't argue, Emmett Callahan. Her voice brooked no opposition. Your mother and I were friends for 30 years. She'd haunt me from the grave if I charged her son for a roof over his head. They ate dinner in the hotel's small restaurant, beef stew, and fresh bread, simple food made with care. Clara barely tasted it. Her mind kept returning to Kruger's face appearing above the loft floor, to the moment the knife connected with flesh, to the desperate ride on a strange horse through unfamiliar country. You did good today, Emmett said quietly, reading her thoughts. Better than most people would have. You kept your head, you fought back, you got away. I was terrified. Courage ain't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing what needs doing anyway. He pushed his plate aside. My ma used to say that. Said fear was just your body telling you something important was happening. The question was whether you let it stop you or used it to move. I almost let it stop me. In the barn before I climbed the ladder. I almost just gave up. Let him take me. But you didn't. No. I thought about your mother's letter, the one from Ruth. Clara looked at him. We saved each other, that's what she said. And I thought about you. About what you'd do when you came home and found me gone. About whether you'd think I abandoned you or figured out what really happened. Something shifted in Emmett's expression. You thought about me. I couldn't stop thinking about you. The admission came out before Clara could stop it. I was running for my life, and all I could think was that I had to get back. Had to find you. Had to make sure you knew what happened. The silence between them stretched heavy with meaning. "Clara." Emmett's voice was rough. "I need to tell you something." "What?" "When I saw you riding up on that horse shaking and terrified." He stopped, seemed to struggle with words. "I've lost a lot of people in my life. My father before I was born. Friends in the war. My ma just this spring. Every time it felt like something got torn out of me. Something that couldn't grow back." He met her eyes. "When I thought something had happened to you for just a moment before I knew you were safe, it felt like that again. Like losing something I couldn't survive losing." Clara's breath caught. "We've known each other a month," she whispered. "I know. This doesn't make sense. I know. I don't trust easily. I don't hope easily. I know." He reached across the table, took her hand. "And I ain't asking you to trust easy or hope easy. I'm just asking you to try. With me. One day at a time." Clara looked at their joined hands, his rough and weathered, hers still healing from the work of building a new life. "One day at a time," she repeated. "One day at a time." It wasn't a promise. Wasn't a declaration. Wasn't any of the beautiful words Theodore had used to trap her. It was something simpler, something real. And for the first time in her life, Clara thought that might be enough. That night, alone in her hotel room, Clara stood at the window and watched the snow fall. Her body ached with exhaustion, but her mind wouldn't quiet. She kept seeing Kruger's face, hearing his voice, feeling the horse beneath her as she fled for her life. She kept feeling Emmett's hand in hers. A knock at her door made her jump. "It's me." Emmett's voice low and careful. Clara opened the door. He stood in the hallway, still dressed, looking as if he hadn't even tried to sleep. "I heard you moving around," he said. "Couldn't sleep either. Nightmares, I think. Every time I close my eyes." "I know." He hesitated. "Would you like to come sit with me? Just sit. My room's got a fireplace. Might help." It was improper. Scandalous even. A woman alone in a man's room at night, no matter how innocent the intention. Clara thought about all the rules she'd been taught. All the expectations that had been drilled into her about what respectable women did and didn't do. Then she thought about Kruger coming for her. Theodore plotting against her, the entire world trying to decide who she was supposed to be. "Yes," she said. "I'd like that." They sat by the fire in Emmett's room, 2 chairs pulled close to the hearth. They didn't touch, didn't need to. Just the presence of each other, solid and real, was enough to push back the darkness. "Tell me about the war," Clara said quietly. "It's not a pretty story." "Tell me anyway." So he did. He told her about enlisting at 16, full of righteous fury and naive courage. About the first battle where he'd been so scared he'd vomited in the bushes before the charge. About friends dying in his arms, crying for mothers who would never know how they'd suffered. About the moment he'd bayoneted a Confederate boy who couldn't have been older than 15 and seen his own terror reflected in the boy's dying eyes. He told her about coming home to a country that called him a hero, and a mother who saw the broken thing he'd become. About Sarah leaving, about his slow descent into isolation, about the years of building walls so high no one could climb them. He told her about his mother's death, how she'd held his hand at the end and made him promise not to close himself off, how she'd said that love was the only thing that made survival worth it. And Clara listened. She didn't offer platitudes or empty comfort. She just listened, bearing witness to his pain, the way he'd borne witness to hers. When he finished, the fire had burned low, and gray dawn was creeping through the windows. "Thank you," Clara said, "for telling me. Thank you for listening. Most people don't want to hear about the ugly parts. The ugly parts are what make us real." Clara reached over and took his hand. "I was so busy building walls that I forgot there were people worth letting in. You reminded me." Emmett looked at their joined hands, then at her face. "Clara." "Yes." "Whatever happens next with Theodore, with Kruger, with any of it, I want you to know something." His voice was rough, certain. "You ain't alone anymore. Not as long as I'm breathing." Clara felt tears slide down her cheeks. Not tears of grief this time, but something else. Something that felt like the first warm day after a long, brutal winter. "Neither are you," she whispered. "Not anymore." Outside, the sun rose over Bitter Creek, painting the snow in shades of gold and rose. And inside a small hotel room, two people who'd spent their lives surviving alone finally admitted they didn't want to survive alone anymore. It wasn't a solution. Theodore was still out there, still plotting. Kruger was still a threat. The future was uncertain, dangerous, full of shadows. But for the first time in a very long time, Clara May Whitfield faced that uncertain future without fear. Because she wasn't facing it alone. They returned to the ranch the next morning, riding side by side through a world made new by fresh snowfall. Clara kept expecting to feel different. Some fundamental shift in who she was now that she'd admitted wanting something more than survival. But the feeling that filled her chest wasn't transformation, it was quiet. A stillness she hadn't known in years, maybe ever. "You're thinking again," Emmett said. "I'm always thinking." "What about this time?" Clara considered the question. "About how strange it is that the worst day of my life led me here. If Theodore had been what he promised, I'd be living in his house right now, wearing fine dresses, playing the part of a respectable wife. Would you have been happy? I would have been safe. That's what I wanted. What I thought I wanted." She looked at him, at his weathered face, his steady eyes, the silver threading through his hair. "Now I'm not sure safety is enough." Emmett was quiet for a moment. "My ma used to say there's a difference between living and surviving. Said most people spend their whole lives surviving, never realizing they forgot to live somewhere along the way." When did she figure out the difference? After Ruth took her in. After she stopped running from her past and started building something new. He guided his horse around a deep drift. She said the moment she knew she was living again was the day she realized she'd rather die tomorrow with people she loved than survive another 50 years alone. Clara absorbed this. The words settled into her like stones dropped into still water, sending ripples through everything she thought she knew about herself. "I'm not there yet," she admitted. "I don't know if I'll ever be." "That's all right. Nobody's asking you to be. You're asking me to try. Trying's different. Trying just means not giving up." Emmett looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "You've never given up on anything in your life, Clara. Don't start now." The ranch was quiet when they arrived. No sign of Kruger. No evidence anyone had been there since they'd left. But Clara felt the violation anyway. The knowledge that this place she'd started thinking of as safe had been breached. "We should check the house," she said. "Make sure nothing's missing." Everything was as they'd left it, except for the blood on the barn floor. Emmett cleaned it, while Clara went through the house touching objects like talismans, reassuring herself they were still there. His mother's remedy journal. The box with Ruth's letter. The photograph of two women who'd saved each other across the gap of stranger and stranger. "Clara." Emmett's voice came from the doorway. "Someone's coming." Her heart slammed against her ribs. Not again. Please not again. But when she reached the window, she saw it wasn't Kruger. It was Sheriff Campbell riding with two deputies. "Emmett." Campbell dismounted heavily. "Miss Whitfield, got news." "What kind of news?" "The bad kind." Campbell removed his hat. "Theodore Ashworth was found dead this morning. Shot once through the heart in his room at the boarding house." Clara felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Dead. Stone dead. Happened sometime in the night. Campbell's eyes were sharp, assessing. "I need to ask both of you where you were between midnight and dawn." "We were at Mrs. Brennan's hotel," Emmett said. "She can confirm." "Separate rooms." A pause. Clara felt heat rise to her face. "I went to Mr. Callahan's room around 3 in the morning," she said. "I couldn't sleep after what happened with Kruger. We talked by the fire until sunrise." Campbell's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "So you were together, all night?" "We were talking sheriff." Clara's voice hardened. "Nothing more." "I ain't making accusations, Miss Whitfield, just establishing facts." Campbell pulled out his notebook. "Did either of you leave the hotel at any point?" "No." Emmett said. We were there the whole time. Mrs. Brennan's staff can confirm they brought us breakfast in my room. Campbell wrote something down. What about enemies? Ashworth had plenty, but anyone specific you know of? Beyond us. Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. Half the town wanted him gone after what he did to me. Miss Henderson's family certainly has reason. And Kruger. Campbell looked up sharply. What about him? Yesterday when he came for me, he said Theodore had sent him. But he also said he wasn't a murderer, that Theodore wanted me disappeared, but Kruger wasn't willing to kill. Clara's mind raced. What if Theodore pushed him too hard? What if there was a falling out? You're suggesting Kruger killed his own cousin. I'm suggesting Theodore Ashworth was the kind of man who made enemies everywhere he went, even among family. Campbell was quiet for a long moment. Then he closed his notebook. I'm going to need both of you to stay available. Don't leave town without telling me first. He put his hat back on. And Miss Whitfield, for what it's worth, I don't think you did this, but I've got to follow procedure. After Campbell left, Clara sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to hold her. He's dead. Yeah. Emmett crouched beside her. How do you feel about that? I don't know. Clara stared at her hands. He tried to destroy me, sent his cousin to make me disappear. I should be glad. I should feel relieved, safe. But I just feel empty. Like I've been fighting so hard for so long, and suddenly there's nothing to fight anymore. She looked at Emmett. Does that make sense? More than you know. He took her hands in his. When the war ended, I felt the same way. 4 years of nothing but survival, and then suddenly it was over. No more enemy to fight. No more clear purpose. His grip tightened. It took years to figure out how to live without a war to define me. You'll figure it out too, but it takes time. What if I can't? What if I don't know who I am without someone to prove wrong? Then you find out. Emmett's voice was gentle. That's what living is, Clara. Finding out who you are when you're not just surviving. The days that followed were strange and uncertain. Sheriff Campbell investigated Theodore's murder, but the trail went cold quickly. Kruger had disappeared, vanished into the vast wilderness of the territory, where a man who didn't want to be found could stay hidden forever. Without witnesses or evidence, there was no way to prove who had pulled the trigger. Some people in town thought Clara had done it. She could see it in their eyes when she passed the suspicion, the fear. The mail-order bride who'd been humiliated, who'd lost everything, who had every reason to want Theodore Ashworth dead. Others thought Emmett was the killer. The quiet cowboy who'd taken in a stranger who'd defended her honor, who'd made an enemy of the most powerful man in the territory. But most people, Clara realized, didn't much care who had killed Theodore Ashworth. The man had made himself hated through cruelty and manipulation. His death, while violent, seemed to many like justice finally served. You're dwelling, Emmett said one evening, finding her staring into the fire. I'm thinking. Same thing when you look like that. He sat down across from her. What's eating at you? People think I did it, or you did. Either way, we're suspects in a murder. Campbell cleared us. Alibi checked out. That doesn't stop people from believing what they want to believe. Clara pulled her shawl tighter. I came here to start over, to build a new life. But my reputation's still ruined, just in a different way. Reputation's overrated. Easy for you to say. You've lived here your whole life. People know you. People know a version of me. Emmett leaned forward. The hermit who never comes to town. The strange one who talks to his horses more than his neighbors. The damaged soldier who couldn't keep a woman. Clara blinked. That's how they see you. Some of them. The ones who like their stories simple. He shrugged. You can spend your whole life trying to control what people think of you, and in the end, they'll believe whatever's convenient. Might as well live true and let the talkers talk. Is that what you do, live true? I try, don't always succeed. He met her eyes. Having you here makes it easier. Having someone who sees the real version, not just the story people tell. Clara felt something warm spread through her chest. "Tell me something true," she said. "Something you've never told anyone." Emmett was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "During the war, there was this boy in my company. Name was William, 18 years old, fresh from a farm in Pennsylvania. Reminded me of my little brother, the one who died of fever before I was born." He paused, staring into the fire. "William got shot at Gettysburg. Gut wound. Took him 3 days to die, and I sat with him the whole time. Held his hand. Told him lies about how he was going to be fine, how his mama would see him soon." Emmett's jaw tightened. Last thing he said was my name. Not his mother's, not God's. Mine. Like I was the only thing he had left to hold on to. Clara reached over and took his hand. "After that, I couldn't get close to anyone. Couldn't let myself care because caring meant losing, and I'd already lost too much." He looked at her. "When you showed up on that platform, something inside me recognized you. Not who you were, who you could be if someone gave you a chance. And I thought, maybe this time I could care without losing." "You might still lose," Clara whispered. "I might leave, or something might happen. There are no guarantees." "I know, but I'd rather take the risk than spend another 10 years being safe and empty." His hand tightened on hers. "What about you? You got something true to tell." Clara thought about all the secrets she carried, the fears she'd never spoken, the hopes she'd buried so deep she'd forgotten they existed. "When my mother died," she said slowly, "I promised myself I'd never need anyone again, that I'd never put myself in a position where losing someone could destroy me." She met his eyes. "But sitting here with you, I realize I've already broken that promise. I already need you, and it terrifies me more than Kruger ever did." "Clara, I'm not done." She took a breath. "I've been telling myself this is temporary, that I'm just staying until I save enough money, until I figure out my next move. But the truth is, I don't want to leave. I want to stay. Here. With you." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. "Then stay," Emmett said simply. "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because—" Clara struggled for words. "Because I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to build a life with someone instead of just surviving next to them. I don't know how to trust that good things can last." "Neither do I." Emmett stood, pulling her up with him. "But we can figure it out together. One day at a time, remember. One day at a time." He was close now. So close she could feel the warmth of him, could see the pulse beating in his throat. "Clara," his voice was rough, "I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think before you answer." "What?" "Will you marry me?" The question hit her like a physical blow. She took a step back, her heart racing. "Emmett!" "I know it's sudden. I know we've only known each other a few weeks. But I'm 40 years old, and I've spent most of those years alone. I don't want to spend the rest of them alone, too." His eyes were steady on hers. "I ain't asking for an answer right now. I'm asking you to think about it. To consider whether what we've got here might be worth building into something more." Clara's mind raced. A month ago, she'd been on a train heading toward a man she'd never met, trusting beautiful lies because she was desperate for safety. Now she was standing in a ranch house in Wyoming territory, being proposed to by a man who'd seen her at her worst and chosen to stay anyway. "I need time," she said. Take all the time you need." Emmett stepped back, giving her space. "I ain't going anywhere." That night, Clara lay awake, staring at the ceiling of the room that had become hers. She thought about her mother working herself to death for a daughter who couldn't save her. About her father crushed under machinery because someone valued profit over safety. About Theodore, with his beautiful lies and cold eyes. She thought about Emmett, his quiet strength, his weathered hands, the way he looked at her like she was something valuable, something worth protecting. She thought about Ruth's letter. We saved each other. That's what hope does. It connects us to each other. It reminds us we're not alone. And she thought about herself, who she'd been, who she was now, who she might become if she was brave enough to try. Morning came with pale winter light and a knock at her door. "Clara." Emmett's voice was urgent. "You need to come out here." She dressed quickly and emerged to find him at the window staring at something outside. "What is it?" "Rider coming. Fast." Clara's stomach dropped, but when the rider came into view, she realized it wasn't Kruger. It was a woman, young, wrapped in a heavy coat, riding like her life depended on it. The woman pulled up outside the house and practically fell from her horse. Emmett was out the door before Clara could react. "Help!" The woman's voice was hoarse. "Please, I need help." Clara ran outside, ignoring the cold. Up close, the woman was barely more than a girl, 19, maybe 20. Her face was bruised, her lips split, her eyes wild with terror. "He's coming," the girl gasped. "He's right behind me. Please, you have to hide me." "Who's coming?" Emmett demanded. "My husband. He'll kill me if he finds me. He said so. He said, 'Get her inside.'" Clara took the girl's arm. "I'll handle this. Clara, trust me." She pulled the girl into the house, sat her by the fire, wrapped a blanket around her shaking shoulders. The girl, she said her name was Mary, couldn't stop trembling. "My husband Jacob. We got married 6 months ago. I thought he was kind. He seemed kind." Mary's voice broke. "But after the wedding he changed. Started drinking. Started hitting. Last night he said he was going to kill me and I believed him." "How did you find us?" "Mrs. Brennan at the hotel. I went there first and she said you'd helped another woman. Said you understood." Mary grabbed Clara's hands. Please don't send me back to him." Clara looked at this girl, this terrified girl who reminded her so much of herself, and felt something settle inside her. Some decision she hadn't known she was making. "You're safe here," Clara said. "I promise. No one's sending you anywhere. But Jacob, let me worry about Jacob." Hoofbeats outside. Heavy, angry, unmistakable. Emmett appeared in the doorway, rifle in hand. "He's here." Clara stood. "Stay with Mary. I'll talk to him." Clara. "I said trust me." She walked out onto the porch, closing the door behind her. The man on horseback was big, broad-shouldered, with the flushed face of a heavy drinker and the mean eyes of a bully. He reminded Clara of Kruger, the same entitlement, the same casual assumption that strength gave him the right to do whatever he wanted. "Where's my wife?" Jacob dismounted heavily. "I know she came here. Saw the tracks." "Your wife is inside." Clara's voice was calm. "She's not coming out." "Listen here, woman. That's my wife. My property. You got no right to keep her from me." Property. Clara tasted the word like poison. "Is that what you think she is?" "Don't matter what I think. Law says a wife belongs to her husband. Now get out of my way." He started toward the porch. Clara didn't move. "You come any closer and you'll regret it." Jacob laughed. "What are you gonna do? You're half my size." "She's got me behind her." Emmett's voice came from the doorway. Clara didn't turn, but she heard the click of a rifle being cocked. "And I don't miss." Jacob stopped. His face twisted with fury. "This is between me and my wife." "Not anymore." Clara took a step forward. "Your wife came here for help. She's got bruises all over her face, your bruises. She says you threatened to kill her. That makes this everyone's business." "She's lying. Women lie. Everyone knows that. I don't." Clara's voice was steel. "I know the look of a woman who's been beaten. I know the terror of someone running for her life. And I know exactly what kind of man does that to someone smaller and weaker than him. You don't know nothing about me." "I know enough. I know you're a coward who hits women because you're too weak to face anyone your own size. I know you think marriage gives you the right to treat another human being like property." Clara stepped closer, close enough to see the broken blood vessels in his eyes, the sweat on his forehead despite the cold. "And I know that if you don't turn around and ride away right now, you'll never ride anywhere again." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Jacob's hand dropped to the gun at his hip. "I wouldn't." Emmett's voice was quiet, deadly. "You might get me, but I'll get you too. And then, who's gonna save you? Jacob's hand trembled. His eyes darted between Clara and the rifle behind her. This ain't over, he said finally. Yes, it is. Clara didn't blink. Mary's not your wife anymore. She's not your property. She's not your anything. You go back to town, tell the judge whatever story you want. But if you come near this ranch again, if you come near Mary ever again, you won't walk away. Jacob stared at her. For a moment, Clara thought he'd call her bluff, charge the porch go for his gun, force Emmett to shoot. But something in her face must have convinced him she meant every word. He mounted his horse, spat in the dirt at her feet, and rode away. Clara stood on the porch until he was out of sight. Then her legs gave out. Emmett caught her before she hit the ground. Easy, I've got you. He helped her inside, eased her into a chair. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen, or the stupidest. Probably both. Clara's voice shook. Is Mary all right? She's fine. More fine than you at the moment. Emmett crouched beside her. What were you thinking facing down an armed man like that? I was thinking about me. Clara met his eyes. 3 weeks ago, I was Mary. Desperate, terrified, with nowhere to go. You took me in. You gave me a chance. Now it's my turn to do the same for someone else. Something shifted in Emmett's expression. Something that looked like awe. You're something else, Clara Whitfield. I'm someone who finally figured out what she's fighting for. Clara reached up, touched his face. Not just survival, not just safety, but this. Being someone who helps, someone who stands up, someone who matters. You've always mattered. Maybe. But now I believe it. She took a breath. Ask me again. Ask you what? What you asked me last night. Ask me again. Emmett's eyes searched her face. Clara, will you marry me? She smiled the first real smile in as long as she could remember. Yes. He kissed her then, right there in the main room with Mary watching from the corner, and the fire crackling in the hearth and snow falling silent outside the windows. It wasn't like the romantic scenes from novels, no practiced grace, no perfect choreography. Just two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of broken lives, choosing to build something new. When they broke apart, Emmett pressed his forehead to hers. I love you, he said. I think I've loved you since you walked off that train with blood in your shoes and fight in your eyes. I love you too. The words felt strange in her mouth, foreign, terrifying true. I think I've been too scared to know it until now. And now... Clara looked around the small house at Mary by the fire, at the photographs on the mantel, at this place that had become home without her realizing it. Now I'm still scared. But I'm done letting fear make my decisions for me. Mary stayed with them that night, sleeping in Clara's room, while Clara sat with Emmett by the fire. What happens to her? Clara asked. Jacob won't just give up. He'll go to the law, try to force her back. Then we fight him. Same as we've fought everything else. Emmett's arm tightened around her. Mrs. Brennan knows lawyers in Denver. Good ones who've helped women get away from men like Jacob before. It won't be easy, but it's possible. And in the meantime, she stays here, works the ranch alongside us, earns her keep and her freedom. He looked at her. That's what you'd want, isn't it? Someone to help you help others. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. How did you know? Because I know you. I see the way you light up when you're fighting for something. The way you stand taller when someone needs protecting. He kissed her temple. You spent your whole life being the one who needed saving. Now you want to be the one who saves. Is that wrong? It's beautiful. His voice was rough with emotion. It's exactly who my ma would have wanted you to be. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church at the end of Main Street. Clara wore a dress Mrs. Brennan had helped her make, simple blue calico, nothing fancy, but clean and well-fitted and new. Emmett wore his Sunday clothes, and for once he'd shaved properly. The congregation was small, Mrs. Brennan beaming like a proud mother, Sheriff Campbell standing at the back with his arms crossed, Patterson from the general store and his wife, a handful of others who'd chosen to see the truth about Clara instead of believing Theodore's lies. and Mary sitting in the front pew, her bruises fading, her eyes full of hope. Pastor Williams spoke the words that bound them together, words about love and honor, about sickness and health, about the mysterious ways God worked to bring people together. Clara listened, but her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about torn shoes and frozen feet, about a platform in a snowstorm and a hand reaching down. She was thinking about letters full of lies and conversations full of truth. She was thinking about all the broken pieces of her life and how they'd somehow assembled themselves into something whole. "I do," Emmett said when the pastor asked if he'd take Clara as his wife. "I do," Clara said when it was her turn. And she meant it more than she'd ever meant anything. They kissed in front of God and witnesses, and Clara felt something settle inside her that had been unsettled for as long as she could remember. She was home. Not the ranch, though she loved it. Not Bitter Creek, though it had become familiar. Home was this man, this moment, this choice to build something together instead of surviving alone. Home was finally having something worth fighting for. Outside the church in the bright winter sunshine, Mrs. Brennan hugged Clara so hard she could barely breathe. "Your mother would be proud," the older woman said. "So proud of the woman you've become. I couldn't have done it without help. Without you. Without Emmett. Without—" "That's how it's supposed to work, dear. Nobody survives alone. The trick is learning to let people in." Mrs. Brennan pulled back, eyes bright with tears. "Now go. Start your life. And remember, if you ever need anything, you know where to find me." Clara and Emmett walked to the wagon hand in hand, husband and wife, two people who'd been broken by different circumstances, finding unexpected wholeness in each other. "Ready to go home?" Emmett asked. Clara looked at him, at this man who'd seen her at her worst, and loved her anyway, and smiled. "I already am." The seasons turned, and with them Clara Callahan discovered what it meant to build a life, instead of merely surviving one. Winter softened into spring, spring blazed into summer, and summer faded into another autumn. The ranch changed with each passing month. New fences, expanded gardens, a second room added to the house for the day when it might be needed. Mary stayed through spring, then found work at Mrs. Brennan's hotel and a small room of her own. Her divorce from Jacob had been brutal lawyers' accusations, a courtroom where she'd had to speak about the bruises and the threats and the night she'd fled for her life. But she'd won. Her freedom had cost everything she'd owned, but it was hers. "I don't know how to thank you," Mary said the day she left the ranch. "You saved my life. You saved yourself." Clara hugged her tight. "We just gave you a place to catch your breath." "It was more than that, and you know it." Mary pulled back, her eyes wet. "Will you do something for me?" "Anything. When the next person shows up at your door terrified and desperate, and they will— Mrs. Brennan told me about you, about how word's spreading. Don't turn them away. Don't ever turn them away." "I won't?" "Promise me." Clara thought about her mother working herself to death, about her father crushed under machinery, about Theodore's lies and Kruger's threats, and all the ways the world had tried to break her. "I promise." Mary was right. They did come. A widow from Montana Territory whose husband had left her with nothing but debts. A young mother fleeing a man who'd bought her at a marriage auction and treated her like livestock. Two sisters who'd walked 40 miles through snow after their father sold them to a mining camp. One by one, they arrived at the ranch with nothing but their desperation and their courage. And one by one, Clara and Emmett took them in, gave them work and shelter and time to heal, helped them find their footing in a world that had tried to knock them down. "You're building something," Emmett said one night, watching Clara write letters to lawyers and judges and anyone who might help. "Something bigger than just a ranch. I'm doing what Ruth did for your mother, what your mother would have done if she were still here." Clara set down her pen. "I'm just continuing the chain. It's more than that. People are talking. In town, in other towns. They call this place a refuge." "Do they?" "Mrs. Brennan says women travel hundreds of miles to get here. Says your name's become some kind of symbol. Hope for people who ain't got any left." Clara was quiet for a moment. "Does that bother you?" Having your ranch turned into a way station for broken women? Bother me. Emmett's weathered face softened. Clara, watching you do this, watching you become who you were meant to be, it's the proudest I've ever been of anything in my life. The anniversary of Clara's arrival came on a bitter December morning, exactly 1 year since she'd stepped off that train with blood in her shoes and nothing in her pockets but lies. Emmett found her standing at the window watching snow fall. What are you thinking about? A year ago today, I was the most desperate person I'd ever known. I had nothing. I was nothing. Just a woman who'd traveled 2,000 miles for a dream that turned out to be smoke. Clara touched the frost on the glass. Now look at me. I am looking at you. Emmett moved to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. I see a woman who built a home out of ashes, who turned her pain into purpose, who saves people the way she was saved. I couldn't have done any of it without you. Same goes the other way. He pressed a kiss to her hair. We saved each other, Clara. That's what Ruth wrote in her letter. That's what my ma believed. That's what we've proven every day for the past year. Clara turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd become her husband, her partner, her home. I need to tell you something. What? I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air between them. Emmett's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, joy, terror, and finally, something that looked like wonder. We're going to have a baby. Late summer, Doc Patterson thinks. Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. I found out last week. I wanted to tell you today, on the anniversary, because I wanted you to know that the day I thought was the worst of my life turned out to be the beginning of everything good. Emmett pulled her close, and she felt his shoulders shake with silent sobs. I never thought I'd have this, he whispered. A wife, a child, a reason to look forward instead of back. Neither did I. Clara held him tighter. But here we are. Here we are. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other, watching the snow fall and feeling the future stretch out before them, full of possibility. Spring came early that year. Clara's belly grew round with new life, and the ranch grew with it. More women passing through, more letters arriving, more evidence that what had started as one act of kindness was becoming something larger than either of them had imagined. Mrs. Brennan visited often, bringing supplies and news, and the kind of practical wisdom that came from decades of running a business and raising a family. You know what you're building, don't you? She asked one afternoon, watching Clara hang laundry while 3 rescued women worked in the garden nearby. A place for people who need one. More than that, you're building a legacy. Mrs. Brennan's voice was soft. Your mother worked herself to death for you. Your father died in an accident that never should have happened. Theodore tried to destroy you, and Kruger tried to make you disappear. I know my own history. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like everything that was meant to break you ended up making you stronger. Every loss, every betrayal, every moment when you should have given up, they all led you here, to this place, to this work, to this life. Clara stopped hanging laundry. What are you saying? I'm saying that your story isn't just about survival anymore. It's about transformation, about taking all the broken pieces and building something beautiful. Mrs. Brennan smiled. Your daughter's going to inherit more than just a ranch, Clara. She's going to inherit a purpose. How do you know it's a daughter? Call it intuition, or hope. The older woman took Clara's hand. Either way, she's going to be raised by a woman who knows what it means to fight. And that's the best inheritance anyone can have. The baby came in August during a thunderstorm that shook the windows and turned the sky purple with lightning. Doc Patterson had ridden out from town to help, but in the end it was Emmett who held Clara's hand through the worst of it, his face white with fear, but his grip steady as stone. You're doing fine, he kept saying. You're the strongest person I know. You can do this. Easy for you to say, Clara gasped between contractions. You're not the one being split in half. If I could take the pain for you, I would. I know. She squeezed his hand hard enough to make him wince. That's why I love you." The baby arrived just before dawn, a girl red-faced and furious with a cry that could be heard all the way in the barn. "She's perfect," Doc Patterson said, laying the baby on Clara's chest. "Healthy and strong. Got good lungs on her." Clara looked down at her daughter's face, at the tiny features, the wisps of dark hair, the small fist already reaching toward the light. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." "What are we going to call her?" Emmett's voice was rough with emotion. Clara had been thinking about this for months, considering and discarding names, searching for something that felt right. "Ruth," she said finally. "Ruth Margaret Callahan, for the woman who started the chain and the woman who continued it." Emmett's eyes filled with tears. "My ma would have loved that." "I know. That's why I chose it." Clara touched her daughter's cheek. "She's going to grow up knowing where she came from, knowing the story of Ruth and Margaret and your mother and me. She's going to know that kindness matters, that helping people is worth more than any amount of money or status. And if she doesn't want to carry on the work, then she'll find her own purpose, but she'll always know what her mother built and why." Clara looked up at her husband. "That's all any of us can do, isn't it? Build something worth building and hope the next generation sees the value in it." Ruth grew quickly, as children do. She took her first steps in the main room of the ranch house, toddling between Clara and Emmett with fierce determination. She said her first word, "Ma," in the herb garden her grandmother had planted and Clara had tended. She learned to ride before she learned to read, sitting in front of Emmett on old Molly's back, laughing at the wind in her face. And she grew up surrounded by women finding their feet, learning to stand, discovering that their stories didn't have to end in tragedy. "Mama," Ruth asked one day when she was 4 years old, and full of questions, "why do so many sad ladies come to our house?" Clara knelt down to her daughter's level. "They're not sad, sweetheart. They're brave. But they cry sometimes. Brave people cry. Crying doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're feeling something important." Clara brushed a curl from Ruth's face. "These women have traveled a long way to get here. They've been through hard things, and they come to us because they know we'll help them get strong again. Like you did." Clara felt her heart squeeze. She'd told Ruth parts of her story, age-appropriate pieces about the train ride, and the mean man who'd broken his promises, and the kind man who'd helped her when no one else would. "Yes, baby. Like I did." "Was Papa the kind man?" "He was. He still is." Clara smiled. "And someday when you're bigger you'll be kind too. You'll help people who need helping just like we do. I want to help now. You already do. You help by being here, by reminding us what we're fighting for." Clara pulled her daughter close. "Every time I look at you, I remember why this matters. Why all of it matters." The years accumulated like snow on a mountainside, quiet, steady building toward something larger. Clara's refuge grew. What had started as an informal arrangement became something more structured, a network of safe houses across the territory. Lawyers who took cases without charging doctors, who treated women regardless of their ability to pay. She wrote letters constantly advocating for laws that would protect women from the kind of men Theodore and Jacob had been. She traveled to Denver, to Cheyenne, even to Washington, once speaking to anyone who would listen about the need for change. "You're famous," Emmett said one evening, reading a newspaper article about the Angel of Bitter Creek. "I'm tired," Clara corrected. "There's a difference. You could slow down, let someone else carry the load for a while." "I could. But every time I think about stopping, I remember Mary's face when she showed up at our door. Or the sisters who'd walked 40 miles through snow. Or the widow with nothing but the clothes on her back." Clara took the newspaper from him. "How can I stop when there are still women out there who need help? You can't save everyone." "No, but I can save the ones who find their way here, and maybe if I keep working, keep pushing, someday there won't be so many who need saving." "That's a big dream." "I've got time," Clara smiled. "And I've got you. And Ruth. And all the women who've passed through this place and gone on to build lives of their own. Some of them are doing the same work now in their own towns, their own ways. The chain continues." "Exactly. That's what Ruth's letter said. What your mother believed. Kindness ripples outward. It doesn't end with one person or one act, it multiplies, spreads, grows into something bigger than any of us could build alone. Ruth was 10 years old when Clara first showed her the ruined boots. They sat in a small case on a shelf in the main room, alongside other precious things, Emmett's mother's remedy journal. The photograph of Ruth Callahan and Margaret Callahan, letters from women who'd passed through the refuge and gone on to build new lives. "What are those?" Ruth asked, pointing at the battered shoes with their split seams and stained leather. Clara lifted the case down and opened it. The boots still smelled faintly of old leather and long-ago roads. "These are the shoes I was wearing when I arrived in Bitter Creek, the day I met your father." Ruth wrinkled her nose. "They're broken." "They are. They carried me 2,000 miles from Boston, and by the end they were held together with wire and prayers." Clara touched the worn leather gently. "I kept them as a reminder." "Of what?" "Of where I started. Of what I survived. Of all the things that had to break before I could become who I was meant to be." Clara looked at her daughter. "Someday you'll understand. Someday you'll face something that feels impossible, something that breaks you down to nothing. And when that day comes, I want you to remember these boots." Why? Because they prove that broken things can still carry you where you need to go. That falling apart isn't the end of the story, it's just the middle. Clara closed the case. "Your grandmother, your papa's mother, used to say that the measure of a person isn't where they start, but how they walk through the fire." "Did you walk through fire, Mama?" "I did. And I came out the other side stronger than I ever knew I could be." Clara pulled Ruth into her arms. "You will too when your time comes. And when it does, I want you to remember that you're not alone. That there are people who love you, people who will help you, people who will reach down and pull you up, no matter how far you've fallen. Like Papa did for you." Exactly like that. The winter Ruth turned 15, Emmett got sick. It started with a cough he couldn't shake, then weakness that crept through his body like frost through soil. By the time Doc Patterson made his diagnosis, the damage was already done. "His lungs," the doctor said quietly, standing with Clara outside the bedroom where Emmett lay sleeping. "I've seen it before in men who spent time in the war. Something breaks inside them, and it doesn't show up for decades. Then one day—" "How long?" "Months. Maybe a year if we're lucky." Clara felt the world tilt beneath her feet. 20 years of marriage, 20 years of building something together. And now this. "Don't tell him," she said. "Not yet. Let me figure out how." She didn't have to figure it out. Emmett knew the moment she walked back into the room. He'd always been able to read her like a book. "How bad?" he asked. Clara sat on the edge of the bed and took his hand. "Bad." "How long?" "Doc says months, maybe a year." Emmett was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled that small, genuine smile she'd fallen in love with all those years ago. "Well," he said, "guess I'd better make 'em count." The months that followed were hard in ways Clara hadn't known hard could be. She watched the man she loved grow weaker, watched the strength drain from the body that had worked their land and held her through nightmares and taught their daughter to ride. She watched him struggle to breathe, to eat, to do the simple things he'd always done without thinking. But she also watched him refuse to give up. Even as his body failed, his spirit remained stubborn as ever. "Stop fussing," he said one morning when Clara tried to keep him in bed. "I ain't dead yet, and I ain't gonna spend my last month staring at a ceiling. You need rest." "I need to live. However much time I've got left, I'm gonna spend it doing something besides waiting to die." So he kept working as much as he could, kept teaching Ruth everything he knew about the ranch, about the land, about the kind of person he hoped she'd become. Kept sitting with Clara by the fire in the evenings talking about everything and nothing, making memories they both knew might be their last. "I need you to promise me something," he said one night near the end. "Anything. Don't close yourself off after I'm gone. Don't build walls again." His voice was weak but fierce. "I know you, Clara. I know how you protect yourself. But Ruth's gonna need you present, not hidden. And all those women who depend on this place, they're gonna need you too. I don't know if I can do this without you. Yes, you can. You did it before I came along, and you'll do it after I'm gone. He squeezed her hand. Remember what Ruth's letter said? We saved each other. That's true. But the saving didn't make either of us dependent, it made us stronger. You're the strongest person I've ever known, Clara. Don't forget that. I won't. And tell Ruth. Tell her I'm proud of her. Tell her she's everything I hoped she'd be and more. You can tell her yourself. I plan to. But just in case. He died 3 days later, quietly in his sleep, with Clara holding his hand and Ruth curled up at the foot of the bed. The funeral was the largest Bitter Creek had ever seen. People came from all over the territory, ranchers and shopkeepers, lawyers and doctors, and dozens upon dozens of women who'd passed through the refuge over the years. They came to pay their respects to the quiet cowboy who'd started a chain of kindness that had spread across the American West. He was a good man, Mrs. Brennan said, standing beside Clara at the graveside. The best I ever knew. He was everything. Clara's voice was steady, but tears streamed down her face. He was my home. He still is. That kind of love doesn't die with the body. It lives on in everything you built together, everyone you helped, every life you changed. Mrs. Brennan took her hand. Emmett Callahan will never really be gone as long as this work continues. After the funeral, Clara stood alone at the grave as the last mourners departed. I don't know how to do this without you, she whispered. I don't know how to be brave without you standing beside me. The wind blew cold across the cemetery, carrying the scent of snow and the distant sound of cattle lowing. But I'll try, Clara continued. I'll keep the work going. I'll raise our daughter to be the person you hoped she'd be. I'll save as many as I can and help the rest find their feet. She touched the simple wooden marker. And when my time comes, I'll find you again. We'll have stories to trade. I'll tell you about Ruth's wedding and her children, and all the women who came through the ranch. You'll tell me about whatever comes next. She pressed a kiss to her fingers and touched the grave. I love you, Emmett Callahan. I always will. Thank you for reaching down when I was on my knees. Thank you for seeing strength where everyone else saw weakness. Thank you for 20 years of proving that good things can last. She straightened, wiped her eyes, and walked back toward the ranch where her daughter was waiting. There was work to do. 10 years later, on a cold December morning, Clara stood at the window of the ranch house watching snow fall. She was 61 years old now, her hair silver, her hands spotted with age, but her eyes were still clear, her spine still straight, her spirit still unbroken. Ruth ran the refuge. Now she and her husband Thomas, a good man from Denver, who'd fallen in love with her during one of Clara's speaking tours. They'd given Clara 2 grandchildren, a boy named Emmett and a girl named Margaret, who were currently building a snowman in the yard with the help of 3 rescued women fresh from the train station. You're thinking again? Ruth said, appearing at her mother's elbow. I'm always thinking. What about this time? Clara smiled. Same thing I think about every year on this day. The train station, the platform, the man who threw me away, and the man who picked me up. Papa. Your father. Clara touched the frost on the glass. He'd love seeing this, you know. The grandchildren, the refuge growing, the work continuing. He does see it. I believe that. So do I. Clara turned from the window. Have I ever shown you the boots? The ones in the case, dozens of times. Not just shown, told you the whole story. Ruth smiled. Only about 100 times. Well, you're going to hear it again. Clara moved to the shelf and lifted down the case. Because today is the day I arrived in Bitter Creek, 36 years ago, and I want you to remember, I want your children to remember where all of this started. She opened the case, revealing the ruined boots with their split seams and stained leather. These boots carried me 2,000 miles from Boston. By the time I got here, they were held together with wire and prayers and my own stubbornness. Clara touched the worn leather. I kept them because they remind me of something important. That broken things can still carry you where you need to go. You were listening. Always. Ruth took her mother's hand. Tell me the story again. All of it. From the beginning. So Clara told it. She told about Theodore and his beautiful lies about the station platform, and the rejection that had shattered her about the quiet cowboy who'd looked at her torn shoes and seen everything that mattered. She told about Kruger and the barn, about Mary appearing at the door, about building a refuge out of ashes and hope. She told about Emmett, his strength, his gentleness, his stubborn belief in her, even when she couldn't believe in herself. She told about their marriage, their daughter, their life together, and the long, slow goodbye as his body failed and his spirit soared free. And she told about the chain of kindness that now stretched across the West Refuge houses in a dozen territories. Laws changed lives, saved futures, built from the rubble of broken dreams. That's the story, Clara said finally. That's where all of this came from. One woman with torn shoes and nowhere to go. One man with enough kindness to reach down when everyone else walked away. Ruth was crying. I miss him, Papa. So do I, every day. Clara squeezed her daughter's hand. But he's not really gone, you know. He's in you in your courage, your stubbornness, your determination to help people who need helping. He's in this ranch, and this work, and everyone we've saved. The chain continues. Exactly. And someday when I'm gone too, you'll tell your children this story. And they'll tell theirs. And 100 years from now, someone will still remember the quiet cowboy who reached down when a woman with torn shoes had nothing left but hope. Clara returned the boots to their case and placed them back on the shelf. Now, she said, turning to her daughter with a smile, I believe there's a snowman that needs my expert supervision. You hate building snowmen. I do. But I love watching grandchildren discover that their grandmother isn't as old and boring as they thought. Clara pulled on her coat. Besides, I've spent 61 years learning how to survive. It's about time I spent a few learning how to live. They walked out into the snow together, mother and daughter, past and future, the chain that Ruth had started all those years ago, still growing, still spreading, still proving that kindness could survive anything, even death. And in the main room of the ranch house, on a shelf beside photographs and remedy journals and letters from women whose lives had been saved, a pair of ruined boots sat in silent testimony. They were broken, those boots. Split at the seams, worn through at the soles, stained with the blood and dust of a 2,000-mile journey toward a dream that hadn't existed. But they had carried her here. Through the fire and the fear and the frozen nights when giving up would have been so easy. They had carried her to a platform where a quiet cowboy had looked at her wounds and seen strength instead of weakness. They had carried her home. Clara May Whitfield had arrived in Bitter Creek with nothing but torn shoes and a broken heart. She had built a family, a legacy, and a chain of kindness that would outlast them all. And she had proved once and for all that the broken things are sometimes the strongest things of all, because broken things know what it costs to stay whole.